Chapter 1423, The Empress Fury. 1423 The Empress Fury. You have touched my reverse scale, Empress Luanxing said darkly, and with a sudden wave of her hand, Hong, a power that could not be resisted, surged towards them. Pa, pa, pa. In an instant, over a dozen heavenly body tier elites had been blasted into a mist of blood. Pu. Pu. The Eternity Sky Emperor and Jade Drop Emperor threw up blood madly at the same time. They exchanged a look. Both of them were shocked. Haven't you yet not passed the heavenly tribulation? Why would your abilities be so powerful? They had all experienced the same, and naturally knew that one's abilities would become stronger with every tribulation passed. Correspondingly, the might of the heavenly tribulation would also increase and maintain a powerful pressure all the same. Precisely because of this, when 10 people underwent a heavenly tribulation, it was possible that 7 of them might not make it through, and die in the end. Yet Empress Luanxing had turned over this perception. She was indescribably powerful. With their cultivation level, added with the power of the nation, they couldn't even hold up against a single attack from Empress Luanxing. How is this possible? She no longer had power of the nation to draw on. The 2 emperors felt incredibly pained. In the end, they were still too late. They looked at Ling Han. If it had not been because of this man, the end result would definitely have been different. They would have long since been able to barge in, and in that case, Empress Luanxing couldn't possibly have broken through. Furthermore, because she'd have been disturbed during her isolation, this would have created a powerful reverse bite for her. Empress Luanxing would have definitely been severely wounded, and thus could have been easily subdued. Previously, Ding Lian had dared to break through the restrictions and attempted to enter because he knew that fact. Otherwise, how could he dare have designs about the Empress when he was only in the high extreme? Looking at Empress Luanxing's position, she not only wanted to kill them. Furthermore, she couldn't bear to kill them immediately, and planned to kill them in a drawn-out, tortuous way. They were both people who had been in lofty positions for a long time, and knew that people like them could not possibly change their mind once they had made a decision. Thus, neither of them had any intention to beg for mercy at all. Instead, they turned their attention on Ling Han. Even if they were to die, they would bring Ling Han along with them. If I can't obtain you, this brat would not, either, die. The 2 emperors exploded simultaneously. They had completely revived their ancestral weapon, releasing the greatest might of heavenly body tier. Using themselves to control the weapon, they attacked Ling Han. This was their most brilliant strike. Too bad, though the present Empress Luanxing was still in the heavenly body tier, her battle prowess had soared into the eternal river tier. It was an absolute one-sided suppression when an eternal river tier faced against a heavenly body tier. Peng, the Empress merely raised her hand casually, and the 2 emperors were frozen stiff, unable to move even a single muscle. They tried their best to struggle, but it was completely useless. They could not free themselves at all. To dare harm my beloved, the 2 of you are courting death. Empress Luanxing's whole head of black locks fluttered, her robes dancing. Even in her utmost fury, she was still amazingly beautiful, and did not make anyone feel terrified in the slightest. I am very angered, extremely angered. When she said these words, everyone's surprise grew further. Previously, though everyone had known, Empress Luanxing had after all still been quite reserved, yet she now directly called Ling Han her beloved. The Empress was really a temperamental person, having absolutely no intention to hide the truth. Fuck, they were again forced to watch a public display of affection. Pa. Empress Luanxing raised her hand and a palm strike descended. She delivered a slap into empty air, and both the faces of the Eternity Sky Emperor and Jade Drop Emperor suffered a slap at the same time. The sound was crisp and prompt. So what if they were 2 great emperors? One side of their faces immediately became swollen, and they stumbled as if they had become drunk. I want to tear the 2 of you into pieces, and feed you to the wild dogs. The Empress was practically extraordinarily furious. Her flames of anger did not diminish, but instead burned ever brighter. At first, she was only worried about Ling Han's injuries, but as this anxiety vanished, she thought of even more. What if she had come out too late, and Ling Han had guarded her with his life, and had died in the end? The moment she thought of that scene, The Empress's eyes reddened, her delicate hands balled into tight fists. Every single hair on her head was filled with killing intent, and every gaze was filled with thunderous fury. If Ling Han had died, she would have killed all the living creatures on Joint Peace Planet to be buried alongside Ling Han. Who do you think you are? Pa. 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 Empress Luan Xing continued to slap them madly. She did not hold any power in reserve at all. After each strike, the two great emperors were completely bruised and battered. After a few times, they could no longer hold on. One after another, broken teeth had been slapped out of their mouths, together with blood. Their hair was disheveled. What austerity of an emperor did they have left? The present them were not much different from wild dogs. Yet Empress Luan Xing did not look like she would stop at all. The divine lightning rumbled, hiding their terrible cries, but the slapping sound was incredibly clear. Pa, 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 it continued to be heard. Empress Luan Xing became more and more furious. She wanted very much to kill these two people, but how could directly killing them vent her anger? Thus, she controlled her strength. However, her eyes focused on the other heavenly body tiers from the two majestic empires. With a tap of her finger, one heavenly body tier elite would be blasted into a mist of blood, both his form and spirit destroyed. This was the majestic bearing of the strongest king tier, invincible among her peers. Long live your majesty! Chu Choshue and the others cheered loudly, so excited that they felt numb. This was their ruler, who could kill one person with a single step, and who had no equal. The two great emperors exchanged a look, and couldn't help but reveal a sliver of grief in their expressions. The gap between them and Empress Luan Xing had already expanded to an unimaginable extent, and they could not even die a quick death. A ruler could not be humiliated. The two emperors roared in fury, and rose vigorously in a counterattack. Naturally, they were not planning to put their lives on the line in a gamble, but rather wanted to make use of the opening of attacking the Empress to draw the heavenly tribulation towards themselves. Going by the regulations of the heaven and earth, one who took the initiative to attack someone undergoing the heavenly tribulation would implicate himself in it as well. Going through the heavenly tribulation meant that they had control of their own life and death just let them die, all right? Hong, long, the tribulation cloud began to increasingly adjust its might according to the cultivation levels of the two emperors. The beautiful eyes of Empress Luan Xing narrowed. The two of you were planning to commit suicide. Quang, the divine lightning descended, and this time, it was targeting the two emperors. The two great emperors looked like they had been absolved. This time, they could finally die. King Tears had their own pride. Even if they were to die, they would die standing, and die an honorable death. A large hand appeared in thin air, forming a shield above the two great emperors. It was astonishingly beautiful, like a mountain of jade. The divine lightning descended, yet was borne up by this large hand, and did not strike the Eternity Sky Emperor and Jade Drop Emperor at all. This Empress Luan Xing had actually moved. Who could have imagined this? Why had Empress Luan Xing moved to protect them? Previously, wasn't it she who had forced the two great emperors into dead end? But in the next instant, realization dawned on them. The Empress did this because she did not want them to die too easily. Instead, she wanted to kill them slowly, one slap at a time. Women definitely could not be offended. This was really too cruel. However, a heavenly tribulation definitely could not be passed on another's behalf. Quang, the next time the heavenly tribulation descended, its might had increased a whole tenfold. This was the heaven and earth showing their might, and was also a warning. No one could go against the regulations of heaven and earth. The offender would definitely be punished. The might of the heavenly tribulation directly increased tenfold, and with Empress Luan Xing's battle prowess, it was not something that she could not stand against. However, this was only a beginning, as it would be followed by 100 times, 1,000 times, 10,000 times. It'd be endlessly increasing right until the person who had interfered would be killed. Thus, even a proud person the likes of Empress Luan Xing dared not make another attempt to interfere. Chapter 1424, The Empress, 2, can be tender and soft as water. 1424 The Empress, 2, can be tender and soft as water. Empress Luan Xing did not make another move. The two great emperors were determined to die, so they did not resist the heavenly tribulation at all. Very quickly, they were blasted into ashes. Humph! Empress Luan Xing still felt that her anger had not been vented. Too bad, the heavenly tribulation had ended, and there was not even scraps left of the two great emperors. She couldn't even feed them to the dogs. She looked towards the few remaining heavenly body tiers of the two majestic empires, and moved her hand in a pushing motion. Pa, these people were immediately turned into a rain of blood, of course. They did not even have the chance to beg for mercy. Chu Qiushue and the others were all numb with excitement. Their ruler was too assertive. She alone was enough to conquer all the elites of the two great majestic empires, showing her invincible might. Your Majesty, Your Majesty. They all knelt, not minding at all that they were on their knees. This was a great goddess, and they had to kneel to her. Yet Empress Luan Xing did not even cast an eye on them. She merely smiled at Ling Han. Wait for me. Boom. She shot up into the skies, and continued to pass through her heavenly tribulation. The tribulation also became more and more powerful. Though she was unafraid, she worried that the aftermath would bring disaster to Ling Han, so she naturally had to endure it in the skies. Actually, Ling Han's injuries were already much better. He had the foundations of the indestructible Heaven's Scroll, and he only had to channel it through his body, and his recovery rate would be extremely quick. He stood up, and went to check on the Rain Emperor. Second brother, how are you doing? I won't die. The Rain Emperor laughed, his whole expression filled with satisfaction. I will definitely be able to take another step on the path of cultivation after this battle. Not too long after, I will be able to step into the middle stage of the consummate level. Ling Han was dumbfounded. His second brother was really too awesome, an absolute prodigy that could use actual battle experience to further improve himself. He could even turn the battles he had experienced into his own enlightenment to support his own rapid improvement. Even if he had not met Ling Han, and did not have the support of his alchemical pills, his second brother's achievements would definitely still be extraordinary. A pearl would shine wherever it was. Senior Shu, Ling Han turned to look at Shu Ran. This man had been bringing an elite in the consummate level of the heavenly body tier to run circles with him, and only now did he finally stop. A muscle twitched in Shu Ran's cheek, and he looked at Ling Han with a strange expression. Only now did he recall something. Why had Ling Han declared that he would ask Empress Luan Xing to dispel the restrictions on him? It turned out that the two of them were a couple. Looking at how Ling Han was willing to give up his life for the Empress, and how the Empress's killing intent soared when she came out of isolation, they were indeed a match made in heaven. And he had actually worried that Ling Han's venture to appeal for him would be ignored, and he instead would be suppressed as well by the Empress. You're awesome. Finally, Shu Ran still gave him a thumbs up. Being capable of plucking a supreme beautiful flower like Empress Luan Xing was indeed a feat worth admiring. Chu Qiushue and the others did not dare approach. They were not qualified. Which of these three did not possess the battle prowess of the consummate level of the heavenly body tier? And the stronger they were, the more they adhered to the rules. The difference of a minor level in the heavenly body tier meant a world of difference. Let's clear up the mess. All the heavenly body tiers of the two great majestic empires have practically died, and it should be time for our chaotic star's majestic empire to unite the world under our rule. A hegemony that would last millions and millions of years. Chu Qiushue and the others were all very excited. Who would have thought that the circumstances would make such a sudden reverse just when their nation was about to perish, and now it would be them that would be uniting the world under their reign? Aside from Chu Qiushue, who stayed back to loyally guard Empress Luan Xing, the two ministers and the 5 generals all left. There was a gigantic mess left for them to clean up. Half a day later, Empress Luan Xing had finishing passing through the heavenly tribulation, and descended. Your Majesty. Shua. Chu Qiushue had just spoken when Empress Luan Xing brought Ling Han to her side with a flutter of her sleeve. She took one step, and she was already very far away. At present, she possessed the battle prowess of the Eternal River tier, so how fast exactly was she by now? Hehe, the couple has some quiet words to speak to each other, so why are you butting in? Shu Ran laughed loudly. Chu Choshua's eyes swept over him, and said, "A thief should not blabber nonsense." She obviously knew Shu Rant's background. Otherwise, how could she possibly dare to be disrespectful to an elite in the consummate level? The Rain Emperor merely snickered. In the small world, he had already left behind many descendants, and now his full being was focused on cultivation. He had long since set aside the affairs of the heart. However, as the second brother, he still hoped to see that Ling Han and Empress Luanxing's relationship could come to fruition. He was an emperor, and in the past, he, too, had many beautiful women in his harem. Thus, he naturally did not think there was anything wrong with Ling Han marrying a few wives. Ling Han and Empress Luanxing arrived at a green, hilly region. The Empress had Ling Han in her arms, her expression filled with tenderness. It should be me embracing you, right?" Ling Han asked weakly. "You are wounded," the Empress said, her tone not allowing for any refusal. However, she thought for a moment, and then continued, "When you are recovered, I will allow you to embrace me." Ling Han suddenly felt his heart soar, and almost became a beast and pounced on this exquisite beauty. However, he immediately hissed in pain. He had indeed sustained very severe injuries in this battle. He had completely used up all the indestructible true fluid, and even rising from the ashes had been forced out. In the end, he had really been at the end of his line, and was burning up his own life force to continue fighting. The present him had shortened his lifespan by at least a few million years. Ling Han did not take it to heart, though. Firstly, he was too young, and wouldn't the matter be resolved if he found some great herbs to restore his life force? Secondly, he had the confidence he could enter into the celestial realm. By then, his lifespan would be unlimited, so that was even less of a concern. For the sake of his wife, what could he not give up? Ouch! Ouch! Ling Han had not cried out even once when his bones had been shattered, yet was now baring his teeth and hissing in agony. He was pretending to be as pitiful as he possibly could be. It could be seen with a single glance that this was all fake, but Empress Luanxing did not mind in the slightest. That was how her personality was. "If I liked you, I would not change even if the skies collapsed on us." It was a complete investment, and she did not care at all if she would be wounded in the process. It was very, very difficult for her to fall in love, but the moment she did, it would be a love that was so blazingly fierce that it could burn herself up. Ling Han pushed his advantage, and said, "Wife, let me kiss you." Empress Luanxing shook her head. Ling Han was just feeling disappointed, when she suddenly lowered her head and kissed him lightly. "You're wounded, so I will kiss you." Ling Han was amused. He stretched out his arms and pretended to show his affection, yet he simply held onto the Empress's tender hands. They were incredibly smooth and delicate, and extremely great to feel. Empress Luanxing indulged him, and gripped his large hand back. She asked, "Where have you been all these years, and what have you encountered?" Ling Han spoke casually, only relating the pleasant affairs, passing over the unpleasant events. However, Empress Luanxing was both intelligent and stubborn, and had him relate even the smallest details, and some matters caused the Empress to fly into a fury. Someone actually dared to bully her beloved. "What plans do you have next?" Ling Han questioned. "Naturally, I will go with you to the Star Sand Martial Arts Academy." Empress Luanxing did not even consider the question. "I do not have any eternal river tier-level cultivation technique, and even if I manage to make my way upwards through my own fumbling, my future advancement through the cultivation levels would also become extremely slow. Furthermore, the reason I had established the Chaotic Star's majestic empire was so that I could draw on the power of the nation so that the 9 great clones could reach the consummate level of the heavenly body tier at the fastest speed possible." Ling Han nodded, and said, "All right then. We will head to the Star Sand Martial Arts Academy together. However, we still have to clear up this terrible mess." "Why?" Empress Luanxing asked curiously. Ling Han suddenly felt like he was about to go crazy. This Empress was a little too irresponsible, wasn't she? Chapter 1425, 50 years. 1425 50 years. The Empress was determined to do nothing, so Ling Han had to work harder and help the left and right ministers handle the government affairs whilst regaining the territory of the Chaotic Star's majestic empire, and at the same time collecting the territory of the 2 majestic empires. This was not something that could be done in just 1 or 2 days. It would take at least 8 to 10 years. Thus, Ling Han also chose to do nothing. He was too lazy to torment himself as well. Ling Han asked Empress Luan Xing to dispel the restriction on Shu Ran, and the 9 Hells ice coffin was naturally returned to the national treasury. Shu Ran's lover had also recovered. She was a beautiful woman who looked to be in her 20s. Her name was Chen Xiao. She was a quiet person, and gave off a very comfortable feeling to those around her. No wonder she had been able to subdue Shu Ran. It had to be known that Shu Ran had also been a top prodigy years ago, and he had advanced into the consummate level of the heaven tier in a mere 200,000 years. Who knew how many people had burned with envy? Of course, in comparison to such unprecedented king tiers as the likes of the Stone Emperor and the North Emperor, he was still considerably inferior. He was barely just qualified to enter into the Star Sand Martial Arts Academy, and it was not so definite, either. Ling Han brought Empress Luan Xing with him back to the Great Ling Empire, and the whole capital immediately exploded. What was going on here? The Empress was actually kidnapped by Ling Han? Though they were a subordinate nation of the chaotic Star's majestic empire in name, the Empress was their matriarch, and as the saying went, when a woman married, she would follow her husband. Then didn't that mean that the whole chaotic Star's majestic empire was her dowry? Moreover, now that the whole world was united, then wouldn't the Great Ling Empire be the largest? Their ruler was awesome. Some were happy, but there were definitely some who would be unhappy, and it naturally was the heavenly phoenix divine maiden. She had long since known that Empress Luan Xing was incomparably exquisite, but only when she had truly seen her with her own eyes did she know how enchanting the latter was exactly. Even she, as a woman, could not help feeling her heart throb wildly. She was worried that Ling Han's whole soul would be hooked by this empress. However, after the empress held onto her hand, and had a quiet conversation with her, the heavenly phoenix divine maiden's attitude immediately changed greatly. She no longer pushed the empress aside, and instead amiably addressed her as big sister. Fuck, she had been soothed just like that. Indeed, the empress was definitely fit to be the master of the harem. Though Hu Niu's battle prowess was high, she was only aware of eating, playing, and acting shamelessly. The big sister position would still have to be filled by the empress, and she was definitely capable of holding down the fort. Just look at how fierce the heavenly phoenix divine maiden was. In the past, she had thrashed Ling Han so much that he was forced to venture into ancient sites. He would rather cultivate a divine technique even if it meant risking his life so he could suppress this fierce woman. Yet now, she was as obedient as a pet cat in front of the empress. Sigh, everyone really had a weakness. The charm of the empress could not be described with mere words. Putting aside how the heavenly phoenix divine maiden was subdued, even Ling Han's 2 brothers and 6 disciples were completely won over. Only the Rain Emperor was incredibly assertive, and barely managed to ignore her charms. Work was now underway, and Ling Han planned to stay in the Great Ling Empire for another 50 years. Then, he would set out to the Long Light Galaxy, and head to the Myriad Directions Galaxy from there. In these 50 years, he had to leave behind seeds in the Great Ling Empire. When he returned in future, it definitely could not be a Great Ling Empire that had declined, but rather a Great Ling Empire that was filled with life. He set out on the task of searching for an heir for the throne. The Empress said she would let go of her hold, and she would. Now, the whole joint peace planet was in her hands, and as long as she was willing, she could even conquer a great many planets in the surroundings as well. But she had thrown everything onto Ling Han, putting on the appearance of a good wife. Ling Han was not made to manage a nation, either. He had still tossed everything off to his cousin. In any case, with the left and right ministers and the 5 generals to assist, there was no need to worry about any problems that would crop up. But when he, Empress Luan Xing, and the other elites left 50 years later, and there was no one there to suppress the left and right ministers and the others, what was to be done? Therefore, he had to expedite the growth of a new batch of elites who could be completely trusted. There were not many people that Ling Han planned to bring with him to the Star Sand Martial Arts Academy 50 years later, because the entry requirements were too demanding. They had to at least cultivate to the pinnacle level once, and this was enough to disqualify 99. 9,999% of all the people in the world. And this was merely the most basic condition. Afterwards, they would then select 100 of the most powerful prodigies to become king among kings, and with this kind of selection, even the North Emperor and Stone Emperor would not dare say for sure that they would definitely be capable of entering. Hence, Ling Han merely planned to bring those who had cultivated to pinnacle level. Aside from himself, there was Empress Luan Xing, the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden, the Rain Emperor, Ding Ping, Zhou and Shu Ran. Those like his big brother, Feng Po Yun, and third brother, Murong Qing, would stay behind in the Great Ling Empire this time. Ling Han set out on the task of grooming new talented people. Feng Po Yun and Murong Qing had given up as well. Pinnacle level was not something that could be cultivated with mere hard work. The most important requirement was still natural talent. Without that bit of natural talent, even if they worked 1,000,000 times harder, it would be useless. From birth, it was destined that life would be unjust. Isolating themselves in the Black Tower, after a mere 7 years, the two of them broke through to the Sun Moon tier one after the other. Ling Han then brought out the Berserk Blood Spirit Pill to help them advance further. Even without being tempered by immortal flame, they could only ingest one every 3 years, and 50 years' time was about enough to send the both of them up to the peak stage of the Sun Moon tier. It was even possible that they could break through to the Heavenly Body tier. As long as they reached the Heavenly Body tier, they would be able to stand as equals with the Left Minister and the others, and there was no need to worry that they could not be controlled. Kang Shuyuan and Yun Yongwang, meanwhile, were working hard at refining alchemical pills. Ling Han had assigned them a mission, and that was they had to become level 8 alchemists before his departure. The cultivation levels of Jiang Yefeng and the others were also soaring rapidly. Everyone had Berserk Blood Spirit Pill that they could ingest, and could advance a sub-minor level every 3 years, which was shockingly frightening. And more importantly, the leaves of the reincarnation tree could be used in tea. This would help them to comprehend Tao. They had the Berserk Blood Spirit Pill for the accumulation of cultivation, and reincarnation tea for the comprehension of Tao. They also had the reincarnation tree, with which a single day was equivalent to a whole year. As long as they managed to reach the Sun Moon tier, that was definitely a transformation with every year, and a great transformation every 3 years. What depressed Ling Han was the fact that there were not enough fruits of the Red Rain Divine King tree. There was not enough to go around, and the Berserk Blood Spirit Pills were almost finished. Furthermore, the reincarnation tree could only sustain the simultaneous cultivation of 10 people, and now that there were so many people who wanted to comprehend Tao, it was necessary to wait for their turn. Thankfully, they still had the leaves of the reincarnation tree to be used as tea, which would assist in the comprehension of Tao. This could be considered as the solution to this big problem. In addition, there were 3 great alchemists here, and one of them was the Alchemy Emperor, even. Joint Peace Planet was so vast, and after raiding the treasuries of the 2 majestic empires, Ling Han also had a great amount of natural treasures in his possession, so he managed to refine a great number of divine pills. Though they could not match the Berserk Blood Spirit Pill, it was still extremely shocking. Hence, the strength of the whole Great Ling Empire was improving at a mad pace. The abilities of Ling Han, the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden, and the Rain Emperor were also soaring. With Ling Han, the Alchemy Emperor, there, what need was there for them to worry about not having enough alchemical pills? Previously, Ling Han had entered into the Medicine King's cave, and he had looted a great amount of godly medicine. Use in medicine. Use in medicine. Use in medicine. He was extravagantly using up the godly medicine in his possession. Why should they be saved up? If they were not used, that would definitely be a true waste. On the other side, all the level 10 godly metal was endlessly delivered over. The procurement had even left the bounds of Joint Peace Planet, and was being done at the scale of the entire galaxy. This naturally was delegated to the Mo clan establishment. Ling Han had promised them a favor before, and would especially look after them in the event of any business. 50 years' time passed in the blink of an eye. Chapter 1426, Return. 1426 Return. In the immortal realm, 50 years' time really couldn't bring much change. These were not empty words. As long as one had advanced into the immortal level, then putting aside 50 years, one might not be able to advance another minor level in even 5,000 years. But in the Great Ling Empire, 50 years was enough to cause the majority to be completely transformed. The Rain Emperor, at the peak stage of the consummate level of the heavenly body tier. Ling Han, at the peak stage of the medium extreme of the heavenly body tier. Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden, at the peak stage of the low extreme of the heavenly body tier. Ding Ping and Jiu Yao, at the peak stage of the pinnacle level of the Sun Moon tier. Feng Po Yun, Murong Qing, Jiang Yefeng, Kang Shuyuan, Chen Ruijing, Yun Yongwang, Helian Tianyun, the Rock Spirit, Rabbit, the Old Ginseng, and the Azura Demon Emperor were all at the peak stage of the consummate level of the Sun Moon tier. The Azure Flame Vulture, Little Qing, was at the early stage of the low extreme of the Mountain River tier. There was nothing to be done about it. It had started too late, and its bloodline wasn't all that strong, either. There was also Yuan Cheng He, Kan Yi, and the others. They had all attained very great achievements, though they could not match the others. If there was anyone who hadn't improved in the slightest, it would only be Empress Luan Xing. She was already at the peak stage of the pinnacle level of the heavenly body tier, and if she did not break through to the eternal river tier, this step was too hard to take. Still, without a corresponding cultivation technique, no matter how supremely talented she was, and even if she could comprehend Tao underneath the reincarnation tree and had reincarnation tea, if she wanted to break through to eternal river tier, that would at least be tens of thousands later. In terms of the time taken underneath the reincarnation tree, that was an exceedingly long time. Too bad, there still did not appear a new heavenly body tier here, especially for those who would be staying behind. At first, Ling Han had been very anticipatory that Feng Po Yun and Murong Qing could break through. What was most satisfactory for Ling Han was that with the effort of the entire nation, the divine demon's sword finally surpassed him, and advanced into level 11. But this was also very depressing to Ling Han. Even if it was the whole effort of the entire nation in name, it actually meant investing all the resources of Joint Peace Planet, and the result was that the divine demon's sword had only progressed another level. If he wanted to further boost its level, he was a bit afraid to think about it. Perhaps only when he became a saint, and went all over the world to collect all the godly metal in this world, would he be able to forcibly push the level of the divine demon's sword to the height of a celestial tool. By this time, Ling Han also prepared to set out. He sent someone to inform Shu Ran, and after a few days, Shu Ran brought his wife to meet EP with Ling Han. Brother Shu? Ling Han was shocked. He could not address him as senior any longer. Though the present Shu Ran still had a head of grey hair, the skin all over his body had become very smooth, and he did not look old in the slightest anymore. If it was not for the fact that that head of grey hair was a little blinding, he would definitely be a dashingly handsome man that could make the hearts of women throb when they saw him. Even so, he also had a unique kind of charm to him, causing Jiang Qiaoling and the other young women to exclaim with shining eyes when they saw him. However, in terms of age, a 300,000-year-old cultivator at the consummate level of the heavenly body tier was indeed exceedingly young. After they reminisced for a while, Ling Han decided to set out. A friend in need was a friend indeed. At the time, Shu Ran had stepped out even in such a dangerous situation. This caused Ling Han not to only be grateful for Shu Ran's previous guidance and the favor that he had done him through his teaching. He had now truly thought of him as a real friend. Thus, he allowed the other to know a portion of the secrets of the Black Tower, that this was a spatial god tool, and there was a reincarnation tree inside. This stunned Shu Ran dizzy. Only now did he know how Ling Han had managed to advance into the heavenly body tier before he had reached 100 years old. With the reincarnation tree in his possession, the world was his. Too bad, none of them had eternal river tier-level cultivation techniques. Thus, they scheduled the breaking through to the eternal river tier for when they reached the Starsand Martial Arts Academy. There was a great saint-level elite overseeing things there, and even the notionless saint would have to address him as senior. Speaking of the notionless saint, this ex-saint had broken through to the heavenly body tier. The rate was fast enough to make even Ling Han envious. More importantly, the conditions for his path of cultivation in this lifetime were really too good. He had a 5-element body, the experience of a saint, the reincarnation tree, and the Berserk blood spirit pills. Merely one of these would allow one's cultivation level to soar rapidly, what more when all four of these conditions were gathered for a single person. This guy also wanted to enter into the Star Sand Martial Arts Academy and shamelessly compete with youngsters like them. Thus, the travelers on this trip included Ling Han, Empress Luan Xing, the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden, the Rain Emperor, Ding Ping, Zhou Yao, Shu Ran, and the Notionless Saint. Aside from them, Chen Xiao, Li Ruotong, Ding Zhizhi, the Old Ginseng, and the Rabbit would also be coming. Though they could not enter into the Star Sand Martial Arts Academy, one shouldn't break up families, either. As for the Old Ginseng and the Rabbit, they were purely there to make trouble at the Star Sand Martial Arts Academy. At first, Ling Han wanted to stop them, but then he thought that there was also a troublemaking large black dog following them, and these two added together probably wouldn't even be able to cause as much damage as a single toe of the large black dog. Xiao, the cloud-piercing shuttle shot through the skies, and flew towards the dark stars. Though Joint Peace Planet no longer had super elites as overseers, as long as there was no news of Empress Luan Xing's death, there would definitely be no one who would dare make trouble. Otherwise, when the Empress returned and called them to an accounting, who would be able to stop her? 2 years later, the group arrived at Cloud Apex Planet. Ling Han went first to the Treasure Forest Pavilion. He had promised that he would teach Han Xinyan the concoction method for the Berserk blood spirit pill until she learnt it. Previously, when he had left, the latter still had not grasped it fully, and he was a man of his word. Thus, after more than 70 years, he once again came to this place. He walked side by side with Empress Luan Xing, and brought this empress to admire the local conditions and customs of this ancient city at an unhurried pace. It had been a long time since he had last come here. "What would you like, ye, Grandmaster Ling?" A worker had just approached them, yet immediately recognized Ling Han. He was suddenly all smiles, revealing a feeling of pleasant surprise that came from the heart. Ling Han had won the second place in the clan competition on behalf of the Lin clan of the Arnuen branch. This was an amazing achievement, and was also a great honor. Even the workers here felt similarly proud. Ling Han smiled, and asked, "Is Madam Lin here?" "Hehe, Madam has been waiting for you." The waiter immediately answered with a smile. "Oh." Ling Han was surprised. Could it be that Lin Yuqi had been waiting for him all this while to give Han Xinyan tuition? Madam had initially been transferred back to the main branch, but has stayed here all this while for the sake of Grandmaster Ling. She said that you would eventually return. True enough, Madam had not guessed wrongly, and you had not disappointed her, either, the worker said. Ling Han couldn't help but cast a look at Empress Luan Xing. This wife of his had better not become jealous. But the Empress was not the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden. She looked very gentle, and not the slightest sign of anger could be seen. Of course, with how the air of primal chaos was enshrouding her, the average person would not be able to see her features at all. Otherwise, that worker could not have possibly spoken with such clarity. "Grandmaster Ling, please wait a moment. I shall go and report your arrival to Madam." The worker departed, and very quickly came back again. He brought Ling Han and Empress Luan Xing to the inner courtyard. However, he was not qualified to enter into the inner courtyard. There was a young maid standing here. With the young maid leading the way, they entered into the inner courtyard, and saw Lin Yuqi in a small garden. This gorgeously dressed woman was presently lazily lying on a bench. She did not wear any socks or shoes. Her 2 small feet were as beautiful as jade, smooth and delicate, just like a beautiful scene of the world. "Yo, handsome little brother, you finally realized that you should come back to see big sister." Chapter 1427 Everyone had a weakness. 1427 Everyone had a weakness. A leopard could not change its spots. So quickly, almost 100 years had passed, but Lin Yuqi had not changed in the slightest. In the case of a heavenly body tier, this little bit of time might not be as short as the blink of an eye, but it was equivalent to a few days' time of an ordinary person at most. Don't misunderstand. I only came to check if Han Xinyan has successfully refined the Berserk blood spirit pill, and will leave immediately after. Ling Han had no desire to trifle with this very alluring woman. Lin Yuqi did not even raise her head. "You are in such a rush, Could it be that you are heading to the Star Sand Martial Arts Academy? She knew even about that. Ling Han was slightly surprised. Though this woman could also be termed a prodigy of martial arts, she was still extremely far off from the level of King Tears. She definitely would not be able to enter into the Star Sand Martial Arts Academy, so how had she known about the Star Sand Martial Arts Academy, and had guessed correctly on her first attempt? Hihi, just look at how concerned I am about you. Yet you only came to visit me after so many years. Lin Yuqi pretended to be aggrieved. No, I demand you accompany me today. Less chatter. Is Han Xinyan here? Ling Han asked in irritation. This woman had to tease him every time. If he did sleep with her one day, and then completely turned his back on her heartlessly, he would really want to see what her expression would be like. Of course, that was just saying it. Ling Han could never be that heartless, so he would rather not trifle with her. However, he would also be displeased if he kept being teased. Yo, you're throwing a temper tantrum with me, why not? Allow big sister to dote on you tonight, and let you vent some anger. Lin Yuqi stood up, and with a single motion, she arrived in front of Ling Han. As a heavenly body tier elite, her speed was naturally fast. Pa, a hand gripped her slender wrist. Lin Yuqi was shocked. At first, she thought it was Ling Han, but this hand holding onto her obviously had delicate skin, and she could tell with a glance that this was a woman as well. Thus, she did not struggle. In any case, she did not lose anything, though her heart did skip a beat. How could this woman standing beside Ling Han be so powerful? She looked at the other, and her small mouth suddenly gaped widely. Heavens, how could there possibly be such a beautiful woman? Even she could feel her spirit shaken just by seeing her. She was almost drooling. Why was it like this? She was a woman herself, and furthermore was herself incredibly beautiful. She could die from admiring her own beauty in the mirror, so how could she possibly stare besottedly at another woman? She had a feeling that as long as this woman spoke up, she would complete whatever task she was given as best as she could, no matter how harsh the task was. With this thought, she paled in shock. What kind of charm was that? Furthermore, if even a woman like herself would be like this, then what about men? They would all be worshipping her, and kneel on the ground just for the sake of catching a glimpse of her toes. Ling Han snickered internally. This great vixen exuded her allure no matter the situation. Could it be that she didn't know that this person by her side was Empress Luanxing? Her charm had no equal, and there had been emperors willing to surrender their empires for her sake. The great turmoil previously had directly led to the destruction of two great majestic empires, and the cause had been Ding Lian's manic longing, which was proof of this person's charms. Were you showing off? Oh, you want to sleep with my husband? Empress Luanxing asked calmly. This. Though Lin Yuqi had a glib tongue, in the face of Empress Luanxing, she was as uncomfortable as a young girl that had first stepped into romantic affairs. That was how shy she was. She was practically dying from the awkwardness. She was teasing Ling Han, and actually met with the latter's actual wife. This could really be considered as throwing herself onto the spear's end. All right then, you shall be serving him in bed tonight, Empress Luanxing declared unexpectedly. From today onwards, you will be a member of our Ling clan, and shall address me as Big Sister in future. Miss, I was just joking. Lin Yuqi got a scare, asking her for bed service tonight itself. She was still a virgin. Empress Luanxing revealed a sliver of dignity, and seriously uttered, "Call me Big Sister." Fuck, are you being serious? Lin Yuqi had originally thought that she was enough of an annoying troublemaker herself, but she had immediately paled in comparison when compared to this lady. The latter practically wanted to force her into prostitution. She hurriedly surged her origin power, wanting to struggle free, yet shockingly discovered that while this hand holding onto her wrist might be as beautiful as jade, and was practically like the most delicate work of art, it did not move in the slightest. So powerful. She hurriedly exerted some effort, but Empress Luanxing seemed as if she had not even sensed anything, and was still shockingly calm. The gap in power was really too big. Ling Han shook his head on the sidelines. Empress Luanxing had cultivated to the pinnacle level, and had furthermore reached the peak stage. Added with the fact that the 9-snake tribe were prodigies of the ancient times and she had come from the celestial realm and possessed unfathomable means, she was truly powerful. It was just like with the Ding clan that Ding Zizhen was from. Almost everyone knew how to use Tide of the Ages. The only difference was that some would be stronger, and some would be weaker. How terrifying a secret technique was that! Even if their cultivation level was completely the same, it would be very difficult for Ling Han to defeat Empress Luanxing. He would need to depend on the indestructible Heaven's Scroll for defense, and finally expend himself to emerge victorious, so how could Lin Yuqi possibly be a match for her? Big sister. Lin Yuqi immediately grinned, her expression filled with obeisance. She finally knew that her inferiority to Empress Luanxing was not only in terms of looks, bearing, and figure. With her personality, she was naturally the type to be flexible. For a man to avenge himself, even 3 years would not be too late, and she was a vengeful woman, so she would get her vengeance in 3 days. When Empress Luanxing was no longer here, just see how she would tease Ling Han to tears. I was just joking, please don't take it to heart, big sister, she said humbly, her eyes soft. Yet Empress Luanxing did not take it seriously at all, and said, joking? So you were just fooling around with me? You're not playing by the rules. The charming smile on Lin Yuqi's face immediately disappeared. Killing a person would only take a moment, and she had surrendered, so you could concede a bit too. Why keep picking on this matter? Her lip twitched, and she said, how could I dare to fool you, big sister? Honestly, she had never been so aggrieved. In the past, who had not accommodated her when they saw her incomparable beauty and shocking natural talent in martial arts? Yet Empress Luanxing's expression was still serious. I never joke around. Since you have fooled me, you have to pay the price. Your punishment will be to service my husband in bed tonight. Fuck. Lin Yuqi almost spat out a mouthful of blood. So no matter what, she was insisting that she would be providing bed service. She had only been joking around, so why had it given her an opening to take her words seriously? She laughed dryly. Big sister, you must be kidding. Humph. Empress Luanxing looked serious. With Lin Yuqi's hand in her grasp, she gave a light tremor, and an overbearing origin power suddenly surged into Lin Yuqi's body along with her own martial intent, sealing off Lin Yuqi's cultivation level in an instant. This was completely one-sided, and Lin Yuqi was completely incapable of resisting. What? Lin Yuqi paled in shock. Her cultivation level had been sealed, and she was now a normal person. What if she would really be undressed completely and thrown onto Ling Han's bed naked? What was she to do? Would she really be dishonored by this little rascal? Hey, hey, hey! Don't let your imagination run wild, I do not accept such slander, Ling Han hurriedly exclaimed. He could tell what she was thinking about just by looking at Lin Yuqi's face that had paled in fear. Big sister, I am really sorry, Lin Yuqi exclaimed to Empress Luanxing, crying. Do you really know your mistake now? Empress Luanxing asked calmly as if completely indifferent. Yes, Lin Yuqi mumbled softly. She had really gained some healthy fear from being sorted out. Chapter 1428 Change. Chapter 1428 Change. Lin Yuqi was a cordial person, yet there was a slight kink in her personality. That was, she liked to tease people. This was especially the case with naive and innocent youngsters, whom she would tease until they became red-faced with embarrassment. She derived great joy from their awkwardness. Now, however, she was almost frightened to death. Although she had already recovered her cultivation and returned to her position on the chair, she still had yet to calm her frightened self. She had a feeling that this woman hadn't simply been joking. If she hadn't admitted defeat, this woman would have genuinely carried through with her threat. It was due to this feeling of a genuine threat hanging over her that she chose to respect yet distance herself from Empress Luanxing. In fact, she felt a sense of fear toward her. Ling Han laughed loudly in his mind. Why was Empress Luanxing the ruler of his harem? Just look at her demeanor. He couldn't help but feel smug. Has Han Xinyan succeeded in refining the Berserk blood spirit pill yet? Yes, she succeeded, Lin Yuqi said in a deflated voice. She would only feel invigorated and spirited when teasing others. Now that an untouchable prey was sitting before her, how could she not feel stifled? Ling Han nodded, and said, "That's good to hear. I'll take my leave then." "Oh, that's right. Why did you mention the Star Sand Martial Arts Academy just then? Why don't you pop your head out to see? Who isn't discussing this matter right now?" Lin Yuqi was showing signs of returning to her previous self. However, after stealing a glance at Empress Luan Xing, she immediately felt a chill in her heart. She hurriedly reined herself in, continuing, "In the past, it's always been one of the Star Sand Saint's 9 disciples recruiting disciples. This time, however, all 9 of them will be recruiting disciples. Thus, which young king tier isn't rubbing their hands in eager anticipation?" "Oh." Ling Han was slightly surprised. Didn't this mean that there would be more available spots? Lin Yuqi raised 9 fingers, and said, "In the past, there were only 100 available spots in each recruitment cycle. This time, however, there are a whopping 900 available spot. Moreover, it's rumored that the most talented among these 900 new disciples will be taken as a personal disciple of the Star Sand Saint, guaranteeing their path to become a saint in the future. Who can resist this kind of temptation? Indeed, even the North Emperor and Stone Emperor wouldn't dare to beat their chests and claim that they could definitely become saints in the future. After all, taking this step was far too difficult. However, if one became the disciple of the Star Sand Saint, then becoming a saint in the future would be guaranteed. This was because of the Star Sand Saint's keen eye for talent. However, the cruel matter of fact was that only one of the 900 prodigies who entered the Star Sand Martial Arts Academy would eventually become a saint. The others would all become stepping stones for this one fortunate prodigy. This was a true battle between prodigies. Once one failed, they would have essentially kissed goodbye to their chances of becoming a saint. This was because this battle pertained to the fight over fortune and Tao. As the saying went, the success of one prodigy would be built on the failure of 10,000 others. Similarly, saints would also be treading upon the despair of other prodigies as they ascended to the pinnacle of success. The success of the 9 saints was but a repetition of this cruel truth. Among the 99 disciples who had entered the academy alongside them at each time, none had succeeded in becoming a saint, regardless of how prodigious they were. They could only remain trapped at the peak stage of the consummate level of the Eternal River tier forever. For example, the Crimson Flame Emperor had also been a supreme prodigy back in his days, even referred to as the most talented prodigy on Cloud Apex planet in the past 1 billion years. Moreover, he had also had the fortune of entering the Star Sand Martial Arts Academy. However, he had lost to the prodigy who was now the 9th saint. Even so, he had continued to strive to become a saint, though he experienced nothing but failure and rejection. Yet, even with this knowledge, the young king tiers still flocked to the Star Sand Martial Arts Academy. First of all, they would at least have a chance of becoming that one fortunate prodigy. If they became a saint, they would then be the most powerful being in the world, someone who could truly grasp their own destiny and fate. Secondly, even if they couldn't become a saint, they would still develop a battle prowess that was unparalleled among their cultivation level, just as the Crimson Flame Emperor had. Becoming the most powerful cultivator under the tier of saint was also a seemingly acceptable outcome. Is it true that only 1 out of the 900 prodigies can become a saint? Ling Han didn't believe this curse. Not only was he going to become a saint, but those beside him were also going to become saints as well. "All right, I understand. Then I'll take my leave now." Ling Han stood up to leave. "Then we'll meet again at the Star Sand Martial Arts Academy." Lin Yuqi wanted to act seductively again, yet she immediately became serious upon seeing that Empress Luan Xing was still beside them. Ling Han was slightly surprised. "Huh? You're also going?" Even if there were far more available spots than before, it still wasn't a case that anyone could enter the academy. I'm a scout. I need to test the waters of the Myriad Directions galaxy to determine whether or not we can expand our treasure forest pavilion there," Lin Yuqi said. "So that's how it is." "Ling Han, don't be too careless," Lin Yuqi warned. "Rumors are flying, saying that the Star Sand Saint is already nearing the end of his life. This time, he might be searching for someone to pass his inheritance on to. Thus, the competition will surely be tremendously intense. You've definitely got to squeeze yourself into the top 900. Ling Han smiled faintly, and said, I'll keep that in mind. Lin Yuqi didn't say anything else. Anyhow, they might meet again at the Star Sand Martial Arts Academy. More importantly, she was afraid of Empress Luan Xing. Husband, we're not going to take her along with us? Empress Luan Xing asked. We can have a new face attending to you at night. Pa. Lin Yuqi was so startled that she fell back down onto her chair. A smile stretched across Empress Luan Xing's face. Did they think that she couldn't play jokes? Ha ha ha. Ling Han wrapped his arm around Empress Luan Xing's slender waist as he casually took his leave. Wife, why don't you attend to me tonight? He whispered in Empress Luan Xing's ears. Although Empress Luan Xing had already started to call him husband, the two of them still hadn't experienced any intimate contact yet. Thus, there was always an itch in Ling Han's mind. Empress Luan Xing glanced at him, and said, I still have yet to cultivate my 9 snakes mystical power to the pinnacle level, so I must retain my purity. However, if you insist, her eyes were watery and full of love. Ling Han's heart fluttered, and he involuntarily gripped her slender waist even tighter. Although this empress was proud, she would be gentler than anyone when she expressed her love for him. However, the more she was so, the more he would cherish her. He pecked the empress' soft lips, saying, It's better that we wait then. I don't want to sabotage your path to the pinnacle level. Empress Luan Xing nodded, and said, I know. Ling Han enjoyed this kind of seemingly mundane relationship with the empress. Even though it seemed dull, who could say that there weren't strong feelings of love between them? At that time, Empress Luan Xing had even dared to oppose the Venerable Trinity to stand up for him. Meanwhile, Ling Han was willing to become enemies with the two majestic empires for her. Love didn't need to be incessantly spoken. Ling Han couldn't help but ask, so, when can you cultivate to the pinnacle level, then? Empress Luan Xing involuntarily chuckled. This man sure was perverted. She pondered for a moment before answering, not before I reach the Genesis tier. Ling Han nodded in understanding. No wonder she had previously required him to reach the Genesis tier before agreeing to marry him. This wasn't because she had incredibly high standards, but because it was necessary. That was the Genesis tier. It would take them at least several hundred years to reach. Ling Han immediately became mopey. Him loving Empress Luan Xing was one matter, and him wanting to make love with her was another matter. From a certain perspective, when a man loved a woman, wasn't he wanting to make love with her forever? I want it too, Empress Luan Xing whispered into his ear. Howl. Ling Han almost howled like a wolf. Who said that the Empress couldn't say seductive things? He truly wanted to push her over and make love with her now. However, he clearly couldn't do this, so he could only forcefully suppress his urges. We'll have Heavenly Phoenix attend to you tonight, the Empress suddenly said. She was truly the best wife in the world. How understanding. Because he hadn't married and made love with Empress Luan Xing yet, he felt too guilty to secretly make love with the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden. He couldn't leave her as a widow any longer. After all, he was alive and kicking. Chapter 1429 Wood Figure Plane. Chapter 1429 Wood Figure Plane. It was a pity that they had to set off straight away, meaning that Ling Han didn't have the opportunity to have the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden attend to him tonight. The cloud-piercing shuttle began another lengthy journey, only arriving at the Myriad Directions galaxy after one entire year. It then flew toward Wood Figure Planet. The Star Sand Martial Arts Academy was located on none other than Wood Figure Planet. This was an open planet that didn't have any planet protection formation. This made it appear extremely generous and open. However, this was also a very dangerous decision. If a starship suddenly launched a sneak attack, the planet wouldn't have any way of defending against it. However, no one was worried about this problem. What a joke! The Star Sand Martial Arts Academy was located on this planet, and inside this academy were 10 Genesis tier saint. 10 saints. What kind of concept was this? Generally speaking, it would be a great miracle if a galaxy could produce a saint. For example, the Long Light Galaxy didn't even have a single saint, with Eternal River tier elites being the rulers of that galaxy. From this, It could be seen just how rare Genesis tier saints were. Here, however, there were a whopping 10 saints on a single planet. Wasn't this simply incredible? Who dared to attack this planet? Who would be retarded enough to attack this planet? With saints guarding the planet, what need was there for a planet-protecting formation? That would be a waste of true origin stones. The cloud-piercing shuttle started to descend. However, its descent was extremely hard to control, and Ling Han didn't have a target landing destination, either. Thus, he didn't pay much attention and directly landed wherever. Everyone left the Black Tower, only to see that this was an expanse of marshlands. Grey mist suffused the surroundings, significantly limiting how far they could see. Such rich spiritual chi. The richer the spiritual chi, the more and faster true origin stones are formed. At the same time, the overall level of cultivation will also be higher, the notionless saint said. After reaching the heavenly body tier, even his speed of cultivation had slowed down. He could no longer advance rapidly simply through cultivation. Thus, he also exited the Black Tower. Moreover, this could also prevent him from being tossed out of the Black Tower and used as Ling Han's shield. As expected of a place that can produce saints, everyone exclaimed. They had been to Cloud Apex Planet before, and they had already thought that the spiritual chi there was very rich. However, only after arriving here did they realize that there were always places more impressive than the previous. Moreover, this was only a mere marshland, and not a holy land for cultivation. If they traveled to those famous mountains and valleys, they would definitely find mines of true origin stones and unbelievably rich spiritual chi. They continued forward. Although those below the heavenly body tier couldn't fly, who didn't know how to tread over water, they all traversed across the marshland, not causing a single splash in the water below. Boom! A gigantic figure suddenly burst from the water, biting at Ling Han and the others. This was a gigantic crimson alligator. However, it had a single bull horn as well as 4 wolf-like legs, making it appear incredibly strange. Little Ching chirped before immediately swooping down and grabbing the gigantic alligator with its claws. It transformed into its original shape, its wingspan reaching 3,000 meters at full stretch. It was even larger than the gigantic alligator. The alligator was only at the shattering void tier, so how could it withstand the power of Little Ching? Its bones were immediately crushed, and it was as dead as could be. Even some random alligator dares to ambush us. It's truly seeking death. But the environment here is far too suitable for cultivation. The first demonic beast that we came across was already at the shattering void tier. This is a clear sign of how dangerous this place is. Millimeter HM. Although we're all very powerful, it's best that we remain alert and careful. Shio. Right at this moment, a streak of light suddenly flashed before them, shooting at the soaring Little Ching. Little Ching's wingspan measured over 3,000 meters in length right now, so it was naturally far too big a target. Ling Han saw the streak of light clearly. That was an arrow. He immediately snapped his fingers, activating the lightning sword technique. His attack reached the arrow even though he had unleashed it later. Pa! The arrow instantly shattered into pieces. In terms of attack speed, it was very likely that no one at the same cultivation level, same major tier could compare to Ling Han. In terms of might, the lightning sword technique was also incredibly powerful, especially since it had been imbued with heaven's might. Fury involuntarily spread across Ling Han's face. They hadn't provoked anyone, yet someone had suddenly fired an arrow at them. What was the meaning of this? However, before they could even seek out the assailant to question them, they saw a man fly over, anger on his face. Behind him were 2 elders. These elders were clearly his servants. "Who's sabotaging my hunting?" the man asked, haughtiness on his face. "Hunting?" He's treating Little Ching as an ordinary demonic beast. Ling Han humphed in displeasure. He was a protective person, and he had just seen Little Ching being randomly targeted by a stranger, so how could he not be furious? "This is my beast pet, yet it was almost wounded by you. How are you going to compensate me?" he asked balefully. "Compensate you?" The man involuntarily chuckled upon hearing this. At this moment, his 2 servants finally caught up to him. However, They didn't so much as glance at Ling Han and the others, merely standing behind the man respectfully. What a hilarious joke. Someone actually dares to ask me, Liu Shiyuan, to compensate them? You're not going to compensate me? That's fine by me, Ling Han said with a nod. Just when Liu Shiyuan thought that he was bowing his head, Ling Han continued, I'll also fire an arrow at you. That way, we'll be even. Liu Shiyuan faltered for a moment before fury completely overtook him. Are you seeking death? Ever since his brother had become a king tier, who had ever dared to speak to him like this? Apologize or eat my arrow, Ling Han said calmly. There was firm determination in his voice. Impudence. The two elders leaped forward, saying, How dare you speak to young master like that? Immediately kneel down and accept your death. Liu Shiyuan crossed his arms before his chest with a sneer, asking, Do you know who I am? Pu. Almost everyone beside Ling Han laughed out loud upon hearing this. This was the standard question asked by every descendant of someone rich or powerful. Why you people? Liu Shiyuan became even more enraged. What kind of attitude was this? How audacious. The two elders immediately charged over, unleashing their might without any restraint. Ding Ping immediately stepped forward. Not willing to be beaten, Jiu Yao also followed immediately after him. Peng, peng. The two of them each threw a punch, and the two elders were instantly sent flying backward, blood spraying from their nose and mouth. Pa, pa. The elders collapsed to the ground, groaning in pain and unable to pick themselves back up. This. Liu Shiyuan was instantly drained of his courage. Although these two elders were his servants, they were, in fact, even more powerful than him. In any case, he was merely borrowing the power of his clan, especially his older brother, to act wantonly. Moreover, it was only because of his clan and his older brother that he had the right to command these two servants who were at the consummate level of the Sun Moon tier. Yet, they were actually defeated by those two young men in a single exchange. Didn't act rashly, Liu Shiyuan stammered as he saw Ding Ping and Jiu Yao walking over. He hurriedly scuttered back in retreat, cold sweat dripping down his forehead. He hadn't imagined that he would cause such huge trouble simply by coming here to hunt and pass time. Ling Han couldn't be bothered speaking any more nonsense, either, directly activating the annihilating dragon star arrow. Shio. There was a flash of golden light, and the arrow had already arrived before Liu Xuan's left shoulder. Pa. His entire left arm exploded into oblivion. Blood splattered into the surroundings. This was truly a bloody sight. Of course, this was already the result of Ling Han showing mercy. Otherwise, how could a measly cultivator at the low extreme of the Sun Moon tier survive his attack? Liu Shiyuan was experiencing such agony that streaks of tear and snot were flowing down his face. My older brother is Liu Juntian. Since you've dared to treat me like this, my older brother definitely won't forgive you. Scram. Ling Han waved his hand, uninterested to learn more about Liu Juntian. If this person appeared before him, he would happily engage him in battle. Chapter 1430 At the foot of the Purple Wind Mountain. Chapter 1430 At the foot of the Purple Wind Mountain. Fortunately my little Qing is uninjured, Jiang Qiaoling said unhappily. Otherwise, I would have severed your dog head. She had very good relationships with the old ginseng, the rabbit, Little Qing, and Rock Spiritual the non-humans. Right now, she was sitting on Little Qing's body and stroking its scales and feathers. Everyone chuckled upon hearing this. Jiang Qiaoling was mischievous and lively, not gentle and obedient like Ding Zhizhi. However, she was a joy to have around. Which of her seniors didn't like and spoil her? This was also the reason why she dared to make trouble. Let's go. Everyone continued forward. Although this marshland wasn't small, how quick was everyone's speed? It took them just a few hours to leave the marshlands behind them. A large city appeared on the horizon before them. After entering the city, they had two main things to do. The first was to rest up, and the second was to gather information. After all, they had to figure out the location of the Star Sand Martial Arts Academy first, no? This was an ancient city that had existed for heaven knew how many years. Without even entering the city, they could already sense its aura of age and history. Upon entering it, this sensation became even clearer. Each tile and each stone exuded a sense of history. The best place to gather information was naturally the tavern. As such, they all found a tavern to enter, not asking for a private room and simply sitting in the main room. As they ate, they listened to the conversations around them. Sure enough, they were able to rapidly develop an understanding of this unfamiliar world. Oi, 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 have you guys heard? Seventh young master of the Bailaro clan just married the darling daughter of the leader of the Stonehill faction half a month ago. Pu. No way. Isn't seventh young master of the Bailaro clan referred to as a handsome man who only appears once every 10,000 years? Meanwhile, it's rumored that the darling daughter of the leader of the Stonehill faction is not only tremendously ugly, but also extremely violent and uncouth in nature. This is like planting a pretty flower into. Anyhow, it's spoiling a good man. What could the Bailaro clan do about this? They're under pressure from their mortal enemies, the Liu clan, so they had no option but to unite by marriage with the Stonehill faction. The Liu clan, They produced a prodigy. Millimeter he's truly a prodigy. It's rumored that he received a word of praise from the Dpankara saint 7,000 years ago. What? The Star Sand saint's seventh disciple, the Dpankara saint, has personally praised him before? Or else? Liu Juntian only advanced to the mountain river tier 7,000 years ago. Now, however, he's already reached the medium extreme of the heavenly body tier. According to hearsay, he's not far from advancing to the high extreme, either. This kind of cultivation speed is truly terrifying. He's definitely going to be accepted into the Star Sand Martial Arts Academy this time. To say nothing else, at least the Dpankara saint is impressed with him. This time, all 9 of the saints are recruiting disciples together. Thus, him entering the Star Sand Martial Arts Academy is a foregone conclusion. To say nothing of becoming a saint, he can at least become an Eternal River tier elite. That's the Eternal River tier. TSK, TSK, TSK. Everyone spoke with spirit and wonderment. Even on a planet like this, where there were 10 saints, those at the Eternal River tier could still be referred to as elites. After all, only a rare few cultivators could reach this tier. Anyhow, both the Liu clan and Bailaro clan were heavenly body tier forces. However, because the Liu clan had produced a prodigy in Liu Juntian, this had heaped a ton of pressure onto the Bailaro clan. After all, these clans were mortal enemies, and the Liu clan was showing signs of surpassing them in the near future. As such, the Bailaro clan had hurriedly gone out to search for allies. The Stonehill faction was an Eternal River tier force. Although they only had one such elite, this elite having retired from public view, no less an elite at the Eternal River tier was still an elite at the Eternal River tier, after all. This was enough to suppress the Liu clan. Ling Han and the others exchanged a glance, all slightly astonished. This was far too coincidental. They had just come across Liu Juntian's brother, and they were now hearing about him from the conversation of others. Moreover, they learned that he was indeed a young king tier, and had even received praise from a saint in the past. It went without saying that he was supremely talented. However, which of them wasn't a king tier? As such, what did it matter that Liu Juntian was a king tier? Would they be afraid of him? Say, it seems like Liu Juntian went to the Purple Wind Mountain. Why did he go there? Don't you know? Many young king tiers have arrived recently, and they've all agreed to taste tea and discuss Dao at the Purple Wind Mountain. This gathering is taking place these few days, and everyone is treating it as an honor to catch a glimpse of this gathering. What's so impressive about that? Isn't traveling there to catch a glimpse simple? Haha, old brother, it's not as simple as you think. Indeed. Not to mention the powerful followers of these king tiers guarding the foot of the mountain, preventing those under the level of king tier from ascending. Even the Purple Wind Mountain itself is a peculiar creation of heaven and earth. Only a handful of heavenly body tier elites can succeed in reaching the peak of the Purple Wind Mountain. Really? There are such peculiarities. Brother, you've definitely come from somewhere else. Otherwise, if you're from here, there's no way you wouldn't have heard about the famous Purple Wind Mountain before. Sigh. Does that mean that I don't even have the right to witness their battles? I've only just reached the mountain river tier, so I'm afraid that I can't even reach the foot of the Purple Wind Mountain. They all sighed in disappointment. However, their conversation quickly took a turn, and they started to discuss their experiences in brothels, comparing which girls were more skilled. They were men, after all, so their topics of discussion would naturally revolve around power, conflict, and women. Looks of displeasure spread across the females' faces, so Linghan took this opportunity to say, "Why don't we check out this Purple Wind Mountain?" "Yeah." Jiang Qiaoling couldn't be happier, and she immediately shouted in agreement. "It's a good opportunity to meet the king tears from this place," the Rain Emperor said, a strong fighting spirit exuding from his body. Not only was he eager for battle, but Ding Ping, Zhou Yao, Xu Ran, and the others were all eager for battle. "Let's go." They paid their bill before asking a random man for the location of the Purple Wind Mountain. This mountain was extremely famous, so at least 9 out of 10 people would know of its location. The Purple Wind Mountain wasn't far from this place, so they decided to head over there as quickly as possible. As such, those who were weaker all entered the Black Tower. In just a few hours, a lone peak appeared before them. There was nothing strange about this peak, yet the winds that howled through this area were incredibly strange. All of them were purple in color. Purple Wind Mountain. It was certainly true to its name. Right now, there was already a sea of people at the foot of the Purple Wind Mountain, all of them raising their heads as they gazed at the peak of the mountain. Meanwhile, there were also several hundred people hovering in the sky. Some of them were at the heavenly body tier, while some of them weren't. Regarding the latter, these were half-humans who had wings on their backs. It was clear that this gathering of prodigies was an extremely attractive event. Even heavenly body tier elites hurried over to catch a glimpse. "How lively," Linghan said with a chuckle. "Fourth brother, let's go. Let's go to the mountain peak and battle to our heart's content," the Rain Emperor said boldly. Linghan couldn't help but say, "Second brother, the king tiers are there to taste tea and discuss Tao." "Exactly, so they're there to taste tea and battle." "No," the Rain Emperor replied. "Fine, second brother is becoming more and more battle-thirsty." Linghan turned to Ding Ping and the others, and said, "You guys wait here. Only heavenly body tier elites could ascend this mountain, and these elites had to be king tiers among the heavenly body tier, no less." Although Ding Ping and the others had reached the pinnacle level, they still had yet to reach the heavenly body tier. Thus, they were far from qualified enough to ascend this mountain. Xu Ran also told his wife to wait here for him. In the end, only 6 people were going to ascend the mountain: Linghan, the Rain Emperor, Empress Luan Xing, the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden, Xu Ran, and the Notionless Saint. However, these 6 individuals were all incredibly powerful. In fact, Empress Luan Xing had even reached the peak stage of the pinnacle level of the heavenly body tier. If she engaged in battle, she would simply be bullying the other king tiers. They made their way through the crowds and prepared to ascend the mountain. There's another group of naive fools. Heaps of people want to ascend this mountain. However, how many of them have the right to do so? To say nothing of how difficult ascending the Purple Wind Mountain is, they won't even have the opportunity to attempt it. The people in the surroundings all jeered and mocked them, showing absolutely no confidence in Linghan and the others. After all, the king tiers atop the mountain had all left their followers below. Moreover, among those who could become the follower of a king tier, which of them wasn't a supreme prodigy when compared to ordinary cultivators? Chapter 1431 Unrefined King Tier. Chapter 1431 Unrefined King Tier. Halt! Linghan and the others were stopped just as they neared the foot of the mountain. This was a group of extremely haughty youths. They were clearly only the followers of some king tiers, yet all of them were as haughty as could be. It was as if their eyes were on their foreheads as they belittled and looked down on everyone else. However, one had to admit that these followers were indeed very powerful. They were all at the heavenly body tier, and one of them had even reached the consummate level of the heavenly body tier. Perhaps this person's cultivation was even higher than that of many the king tiers. However, those who could obtain the title of king tier certainly hadn't done so because of a high cultivation level. Rather, They had obtained this title because of their battle prowess against those at the same cultivation level. Only those who could obliterate everyone at the same cultivation level had the right to obtain the title of King Tier. Ling Han glanced at them and asked, "Why?" "The King Tiers are currently tasting tea and discussing Dao, so all uninvolved persons are prohibited from disturbing them," a youth in purple robes answered indifferently. He didn't so much as glance at Ling Han and the others. Ling Han involuntarily chuckled and asked, "Does your clan own this mountain?" "No," the young man in purple subconsciously answered, shaking his head as he spoke. "Then what the hell are you stopping us for?" Ling Han chided. "You." The young man in purple was enraged, flames of anger burning in his eyes. However, upon recalling his master's words, he forcefully suppressed his anger, waving his hand and saying, "Anyhow, no one is allowed to ascend the mountain today." "Then why are there people atop the mountain?" Ling Han asked. He was in quite a good mood, so he started to debate with the youth. The young man in purple was exasperated, and he replied, "If there's no one, how can they taste tea and discuss Dao?" "Exactly. Since others can ascend the mountain, why can't we?" Ling Han chuckled, and continued, "Perhaps the tea is too expensive? Rest assured, this brother is rich. Very rich. It's useless regardless of how rich you are. That's a gathering of King Tiers. Even ordinary prodigies don't have the right to attend." The young man in purple was already rendered speechless by Ling Han. How was this person so good at sophism? He paused for a moment before asking, "Do you have the right to attend this gathering? Are you very powerful?" "Why not?" Ling Han retorted with a smile. "Although I might not look sturdy, I can battle against 5 of you with no problem. If you can defeat me, I'll allow you to ascend the mountain." Although the young man in purple had only exchanged a few words with Ling Han, he had already become extremely annoyed and exasperated. At this moment, he finally couldn't contain himself any longer. Ling Han looked at his companions and asked, "What about them?" The other followers were all spectating an interesting show at this moment, and they couldn't help but chuckle upon hearing this, replying, "If you can defeat Wendong, we'll allow all of you to pass." "Deal." Ling Han started to stretch his body. Meanwhile, Empress Luan Xing and the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden both smiled faintly. They were wearing cloaks at this moment, with even their beautiful faces covered by their clothing. Otherwise, they would definitely cause a huge commotion. After all, there were far too many heavenly body tier elites here, meaning that ordinary methods wouldn't be able to hide their beauty. Beside them, the Rain Emperor had his arms crossed before his chest. He naturally felt it beneath him to battle against such small fry. Anyhow, he wasn't feeling impatient at all. After all, the King Tiers atop the mountain weren't going to run away. The young man in purple was called Wendong, and upon seeing Ling Han's strange stretches, he couldn't help but chuckle in scorn. "How about this?" he said. "There's no need for us to battle. I'll stand here and let you punch me 3 times. If you can push me back even a single step, I'll make an exception and allow you guys to ascend the mountain." The other followers all giggled and laughed. They were all supreme prodigies, meaning that they were at least 4-star geniuses. In other words, they were far more powerful than those at the same cultivation level. Although Wendong was allowing Ling Han to punch him 3 times, it would be incredibly easy for him to withstand these punches as long as he used his origin power to guard his body. "No kidding?" Ling Han asked, purposefully looking toward Wendong in mock excitement. "Why would I trick you?" Wendong said in disdain. In reality, what did it matter even if they allowed Ling Han and the others to ascend the mountain? Could they resist the strange power of this strange mountain? Even prodigies such as them found it extremely difficult to resist this power. Only King Tiers could resist this strange power as if it were nothing. "Then please excuse me," Ling Han said with a chuckle. He was just about to launch a strike, but he suddenly paused, asking, "Should I use my full power?" "Of course," Wendong answered proudly. "What if I accidentally kill you?" Ling Han asked apologetically. Wendong felt like pulling his own hair out. "You think you can kill me with your measly power? What an absolute joke." He humphed and said, "Punch me as hard as you can. But I can't. If I truly kill you, your parents will definitely come and cause a ruckus. And also your aunties and grandparents and what not. What will I do at that time? Ling Han shook his head, and it was as if he wouldn't use his full power no matter what. Wen Dong's face twitched, and his voice involuntarily went up a pitch. I've told you to attack, so just bloody attack. If you can truly wound me, I'll admit that you're powerful. I won't complain even if you kill me. The people here are all witnesses. Ling Han breathed a long sigh of relief, saying, thanks for the assurance. It was as if a heavy weight had been lifted off his shoulders. Fuck. Do you truly think that you can kill me? Wen Dong felt incredibly irritated at this moment, and he had a strong urge to beat someone up. However, upon recalling his own promise, he could only humph heavily, and said, can you attack now? Ling Han was delighted upon hearing this, and he said, second brother, brother Shu, wives, have you ever seen such a despicable person before? He's actually asking to be beaten up. No, the Rain Emperor and the others replied, smiling as they shook their heads. Even the notionless saint was smiling faintly. Pu. Even the other followers couldn't help but splutter with laughter. They felt that Ling Han was far too malicious. He had actually dug such a huge trap for Wen Dong. Wen Dong was naturally enraged, and it was as if flames were bursting from his eyes. He was just about to attack. Hey, what are you doing? Didn't we reach an agreement? Ling Han immediately said. Wen Dong's raised fist froze in the air. He was a supreme prodigy, after all, so he naturally cared about his reputation. Under the watchful gazes of everyone, how could he go back on his own words? He was simmering with anger as he lowered his fist, and it was as if there were a ball of pain in his chest. He swore that he would definitely give Ling Han trouble after allowing him to throw his 3 punches. Ling Han's expression suddenly became serious as he started to channel his origin power. He raised his right fist and gathered heaven's might, unleashing a devastating aura into the surroundings. Pa, 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 pa. Many of the surrounding spectators instantly collapsed to the ground. This was heaven's might, and it would render those under Ling Han's cultivation level completely defenseless. Even if one were above Ling Han's cultivation level, their power would still be forcefully suppressed by 2 stars. Wen Dong's expression changed drastically. His cultivation was equivalent to Ling Han's, with both of them at the medium extreme of the heavenly body tier. As such, he didn't collapse to the ground in fright. However, upon sensing the formidable aura emanating from Ling Han's body, an ice-cold chill involuntarily rose in his heart. This man definitely wasn't an ordinary heavenly body tier elite. Nor was he a supreme prodigy. He was a fucking king tier. He had been a follower of a king tier for so long, so how could he not realize this? Wen Dong wanted to cry. They were at the same cultivation level, so how could he block 3 punches from a king tier? To say nothing of 3 punches, he wouldn't even be able to block a single punch. He had been screwed over. A look of grief spread across his face. This crude and unrefined king tier had screwed him over twice. I admit defeat. I admit defeat, he hurriedly shouted. If he were struck by this punch, he would truly have died for nothing. After all, hadn't he said so himself? Ling Han wouldn't need to take responsibility even if he killed him. You're admitting defeat already? There was a look of disappointment on Ling Han's face, and he continued, you've at least got to let me punch you once, right? He started to haggle with Wen Dong. No. Wen Dong shouted, shaking his head furiously. Ling Han looked toward the other followers, and said, how about one of you replace him? No, the followers shouted, all shaking their heads frantically. Only then did Ling Han say, this mountain isn't owned by your clans, is it? Does it feel awesome and mighty to control entry to this mountain? The spectators finally understood that Ling Han wasn't pretending to be weak to bully them. Rather, he had purposefully pretended to be weak to give these haughty followers a lesson. Chapter 1432, The Victim Has Arrived. Chapter 1432, The Victim Has Arrived. Gasp. Who would have thought? He was actually a king tier. I wonder which galaxy he came from. He was able to become a king tier, so he's definitely from a large galaxy. However, this king tier appears a bit devilish. He purposefully dug a hole for Wendong and screwed him over. Hare, who told them to seal this area off and even prohibit others from ascending the mountain? I feel like he taught them a good lesson. The Purple Wind Mountain isn't owned by their clans. Exactly. The cultivators at the foot of the mountain launched into a spirited discussion, some of them feeling that Ling Han was slightly devilish, and many more of them supporting his actions. Let's climb the mountain, the Rain Emperor said. His fists were already starting to itch. Seeing that Ling Han and the others were preparing to climb the mountain, a cold sneer involuntarily stretched across Wendong's face. Where do you think this is? Why do you think the prodigies chose this place to taste tea and discuss Tao? It's because no one else can reach the top of this mountain. King Tears could naturally reach the top of this mountain with ease. However, even 4-star geniuses like them would feel under immense pressure if they tried to climb to the peak of this mountain. At least, they definitely wouldn't have any remaining energy to engage in battles. According to rumors, the Purple Wind Mountain had only become like this because of the actions of a saint. It was him who had transformed this mountain, imbuing it with its strange powers. When it came to ordinary cultivators, they would struggle to ascend this mountain even if they had reached the heavenly body tier. Only by reaching the pinnacle level in at least one major tier and then reaching the heavenly body tier would one obtain the ability to climb this mountain easily. Moreover, the more pinnacle levels that one had reached, the easier it would be to climb this mountain. Are these people all King Tears? What a joke. How can that be possible? Wendong was eager to see them fail. He had been embarrassed before everyone, and thus he naturally yearned to see them being embarrassed before everyone as well. This way, he would at least have some consolation. Not only was Wendong thinking this, but many other people were also thinking the same thing. How rare were King Tears? It was extremely difficult for a planet to produce even one King Tear. As such, it was likely that there would only be 10 such King Tears in an entire galaxy. Moreover, this was for a large galaxy. If it were a small galaxy, perhaps it would only be able to produce 1 or 2 King Tears. In fact, it was entirely possible that it would produce none. Just as Ling Han and the others were about to embark on their climb, they suddenly saw 3 figures shooting over from the distance. One of them was in a wretched state, with his entire left arm non-existent. All that was left was a patch of mangled flesh. Young Master Yuan! Young Master Yuan, a follower in green, suddenly exclaimed. There was a stunned expression on his face. Just then, he hadn't recognized the wounded person, because he had refused to believe that anyone on Wood Figure Planet, especially in this Purple Wind Mountain region, would dare to target a member of the Liu clan. Indeed, the wounded person was none other than Liu Shiyuan, the haughty youth who had been shot by Ling Han. Brother Qing! Liu Shiyuan exclaimed. Tears involuntarily started to stream down his face as soon as he saw the follower in green. Family! He had finally seen family. He was incredibly moved, and he used his only arm to grab onto the follower in green, saying, Brother Qing, you've got to help me exact revenge. You've got to help me exact revenge. Who wounded you? The person who Liu Shiyuan referred to as Brother Qing asked, his face cold and full of killing intent. He was called Zhong Qing, and he wasn't actually a member of the Liu clan. Rather, he was the follower of the young King Tier, Liu Juntian. He was naturally very powerful, and he was also a prodigy and a 4-star genius. He could be referred to as a supreme prodigy no matter where he went. Anyhow, he had only decided to follow Liu Juntian because he felt that Liu Juntian had a profoundly dazzling future. In fact, he believed that Liu Juntian could become a saint in the future. Meanwhile, he understood that he would have 0 chance of becoming a saint himself. As such, if he rode on Liu Juntian's coattails, perhaps he could even become an Eternal River Tier elite in the future. That was the Eternal River Tier. Was it not impressive enough? Thus, he treated the Liu clan as his own family. In fact, he treated it as more than his family. It was hundreds of times more important. That being the case, how could he not feel enraged and worried upon seeing Liu Xuan's severe wounds? It was a group of despicable men and women. Their leader. Liu Xuan's gaze had been focused on Zhong Qing, yet he suddenly felt a terrifying chill creep up from behind him. He involuntarily turned around to look, only to see the man who was the root of his nightmares behind him. He couldn't help but scream. His speed was slower than Ling Han's, but he hadn't taken any detours along the way. He had directly hurried over here to ask his elder brother to exact revenge for him. Thus, he had only arrived here slightly later than Ling Han and the others. However, just as he was speaking of his nemesis had appeared behind him. Liu Shiyuan immediately scuttled behind Zhong Qing in fright, using his only hand to point at Liu Shiyuan, shouting, "Brother Qing, it was him. It was him. Hurry up and attack him. Kill him for me. No, severely wound him so I can kill him with my own hand. And those two women. Although their faces are covered, their bodies are quite shapely." As he spoke, his mind started to wander. His mind was wandering with lust even under such conditions. From this, it was clear that Liu Shiyuan lived up to the name of a true profligate. However, Zhong Qing was instantly terrified. Although he was also a prodigy, could he compete against a true king tier? No. Unless his cultivation level was far superior. Right now, however, he was only at the low extreme of the heavenly body tier. He was already no match for him in terms of cultivation level. Moreover, how large was the gulf between prodigies and king tiers? How could he exact revenge for Liu Shiyuan? If he attacked, he would merely be seeking death. Brother Qing, why are you hesitating? Hurry up and attack him, Liu Shiyuan urged. A look of displeasure spread across his face. He was only referring to Zhong Qing as Brother Qing because his elder brother had asked him to do so. This was because Zhong Qing was a relatively good lackey he could use. Thus, he needed to take more care of his feelings. However, Zhong Qing was actually pretending to be deaf and mute when his nemesis was right before him. How could Liu Shiyuan not be displeased? What's the meaning of this? You're eating from my Liu clan's bowl, yet you're not going to act as my Liu clan's dog. However, how would Zhong Qing dare to attack? There was a bitter look on his face, and he said, "Young Master Yuan, that person is a king tier." What? Liu Shiyuan was instantly startled. His elder brother was also a king tier, so he naturally understood what these two words represented: invincible among the same cultivation level. Of course, this was an oxymoron because invincible implied that only one person could become a king tier for any one cultivation level. Even so, a king tier would be invincible at least on their own planet. Even when casting one's gaze over entire galaxies, king tiers would only have fewer than 10 or so opponents. King tier, these two words were like a huge mountain in and of themselves. They were capable of crushing someone until they were barely able to breathe. However, a look of haughtiness immediately returned to Liu Xuan's face, and he said, "There are ranks even among king tiers. My older brother is a rank 2 king tier." Indeed, just as he said, there were also ranks among king tiers. Even though they were all at the heavenly body tier, would two people be of equivalent power if one had reached one pinnacle level while the other had reached 2 pinnacle levels? Even though the benefits of reaching these pinnacle levels would decrease as one advanced in cultivation, the gap between the king tiers would still exist, just that it wouldn't be overly significant. However, to king tiers, any slight gap could prove fatal when they were battling against a fellow king tier of the same cultivation. If a king tier had reached one pinnacle level, they would be referred to as a rank 1 king tier. If they had reached 2 pinnacle levels, they would be referred to as a rank 2 king tier. If they had reached 3, they would be referred to as a rank 3 king tier, and so on and so forth. However, the maximum was only rank 5. After all, there were only so many pinnacle levels for one to reach. It was already common knowledge that king tiers were rare, with one galaxy only producing at most 10 king tiers. Among these, perhaps there would only be 1 or 2 rank 2 king tiers. In fact, it was even possible that there would be none. However, Liu Juntian was none other than a rank 2 king tier. "Where's my brother? Call my brother over. Have him suppress this person." Liu Shiyuan finally realized that Zhong Qing wouldn't be able to defeat Ling Han. Zhong Qing immediately made a decision, saying, "I'll inform Master straight away." He knew that Liu Juntian only had this one younger brother, and he was more so extremely doting toward him. Humph, this person actually dared to wound me. He's truly become tired of Liu Shiyuan said arrogantly. There were so many people here, and thus he wasn't afraid of Ling Han attacking him. He wouldn't dare. Peng. However, before he had even finished speaking, he suddenly transformed into a cloud of flesh and blood. Chapter 1433 All King Tears. Chapter 1433 All King Tears. Zhongqing was just about to ascend the mountain, yet he suddenly stopped in his tracks, his jaws dropping wide open. It was as if he were struck by disbelief. Not only him, but everyone in the surroundings was also stunned. Gazing at the cloud of blood that had once been Liu Shiyuan, then turning to gaze at Ling Han, who was still casually retracting his fist, they felt a sensation of frightening numbness spreading over their bodies. There was also an indescribable chill rising in their hearts. That was Liu Juantian's younger brother. To put things into perspective, at least several hundred of the cultivators present could insta-kill Liu Shiyuan. However, even if Liu Shiyuan slapped them across the face, most of them would still choose to play along with him, perhaps even sticking their heads forward to let him slap them more. Meanwhile, those who were more courageous and powerful might dodge his slaps. However, in terms of fighting back, no one would dare to even think about this. This was simply due to one reason: Liu Juntian. Now, however, someone had actually dared to kill his younger brother. The sky was going to collapse. They could imagine just how wild with rage Liu Juntian would become. Under his wrathful fury, it was even possible that he would kill all of the people present. Who told them to stand idly by as his brother was killed? There was bitterness in their minds. Who knew that Ling Han would kill him? Who knew that Ling Han dared to kill him? Moreover, Ling Han was a king tier. Even if they knew he was going to attack, how many of them would be able to stop him? They were done for. Ling Han had poked a hole in the heavens. The surrounding cultivators were all as quiet as a mouse. What were they going to do now? Why you dare? Zhongqing stammered. He was also stupefied. Even if you're a king tier, openly killing the younger brother of another king tier is an utter provocation. This is creating a life and death feud. Anyhow, where is your courage coming from? Didn't you hear Liu Shiyuan say? Liu Juntian is a rank 2 king tier. Rank 2. How many rank 2 king tiers exist in the world? However, Ling Han didn't pay any heed to him. Liu Shiyuan had actually dared to speak uncouthly of Empress Luan Xing and the heavenly phoenix divine maiden. How could he tolerate this? To say nothing of Liu Shiyuan, his reaction would have been the same even if it were Liu Juntian who had uttered those words. He would simply respond with a punch. Let's go. The 6 of them walked away and started to climb the mountain. Holy fuck. How domineering. These people dared to climb the mountain even though they had killed Liu Juantian's younger brother. Just how courageous were they? However, are you certain that you can oppose Liu Juntian? Although he was only at the medium extreme of the heavenly body tier, he was already regarded as the number 1 elite of the Liu clan. Moreover, he had even been praised by a saint before. His battle prowess could only be described as peerless. Zhongqing was completely flabbergasted. Although he wished that he could kill Ling Han, he couldn't help but feel impressed by his demeanor. This was the courage that a true king tier should possess. He dared to kill, and he dared to face the turmoils that would arise from such an action. His resolve definitely wouldn't be swayed by others. Meanwhile, Ling Han and the others ascended the mountain, appearing as relaxed as could be. Holy fuck. Am I seeing things? Am I also seeing things? Gasp. Everyone drew a cold breath. All 6 of them are able to ascend the mountain. Moreover, it appears like they're all ascending it with ease. Holy motherfucker. 6 king tiers. Heavens. They all clasped their heads in astonishment. This was inconceivable. 6 king tiers had actually appeared at once. There were obviously more than 6 king tiers atop the mountain. However, which of them hadn't arrived alone? At most, they had only brought with them a few followers. As such, they had all initially thought that the Rain Emperor and the others were merely Ling Han's followers. Gazing at them now, they realized that the level of followers would have been raised to a completely new level if those 5 people were truly Ling Han's followers. Their incredible power was abundantly clear for all to see. Zhongqing was also doing his best to climb the mountain, yet he was exerting all of the effort that he could possibly muster. However, the distance between him and Ling Han's group was steadily growing larger and larger. His body was drenched in sweat, yet he couldn't catch up to them no matter what. Meanwhile, Ling Han and the others were casually chattering and joking among themselves, appearing as carefree as could be. If they knew that there were still 2 king tiers in Dingping and Jiaojust, that they couldn't ascend the mountain, because they hadn't reached the heavenly body tier yet, their expressions on their faces would definitely be even more peculiar. Which galaxy did they come from? It's far too terrifying. It actually produced so many king tiers. Perhaps that young man is also a rank 2 king tier? If that's the case, he naturally doesn't need to fear Liu Juntian. Heh, you really have a wild imagination, don't you? Do you think it's that easy to become a rank 2 king tier? There mightn't even be one such king tier among 10 king tiers. Nothing in the world is absolute. Haven't you heard the story? In the past, there was a Shi clan that produced 3 king tiers. Moreover, they were all rank 2 king tiers. I've naturally heard about that. However, can they compare to the Shi clan? At that time, the Shi clan had a saint. Those king tiers all possessed the bloodline of a saint. But if he isn't a rank 2 king tier, how would he dare to ascend the mountain? The people at the foot of the mountain became engaged in a heated debate. Of course, they were even more eager to witness the battle that was about to explode atop the mountain. Once Zhongqing brought the news of Liu Xuan's death up, a bloody battle would definitely erupt among the king tiers. This wouldn't be sparring. Instead, it would be a genuine life-and-death battle. Interesting. There's a hint of pressure from this wind, and it targets one's divine sense, Ling Han said. This is the doing of a saint, the notionless saint said. He was the most qualified to speak about this. I also did something similar in the past, setting up a forbidden region that only king tiers could enter. The others all chuckled indifferently. This saint was very fond of blowing his own trumpet. In the beginning, they had all been startled and astonished by his stories. However, they had all become immune to it now, and they wouldn't pay much heed to his exaggerated stories. As long as one has reached 1 pinnacle level, they'll develop an extremely powerful resistance to this might. If they reach 2, they can almost ignore this might, the Rain Emperor said with a nod. Among them, Empress Luan Xing was the least affected by the might of the wind. She had reached 3 pinnacle levels, which was an incredibly rare feat, even among saints. In other words, even if the Star Sand Saint were suppressed to the heavenly body tier, he mightn't necessarily be able to defeat Empress Luanxing. Meanwhile, the heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden was facing a slight struggle. After all, she hadn't reached the pinnacle level of the Mountain River tier. Rank 1 king tiers could only just manage to climb this mountain with ease. They weren't climbing quickly, and they were also comprehending the Tao of the saint as they advanced. This might wasn't just might alone, but also possessed a wisp of the saint's Tao. Thus, comprehending it would be of some benefit to them. Zhongqing was climbing the mountain as if his life depended on it, yet he continued to fall further and further behind Ling Han and the others. Eventually, his figure was blocked by a jutting face of the mountain, rendering him invisible. 15 minutes passed, and Ling Han and the others reached the peak of the mountain. A flat platform had been forcefully carved into the top of the mountain, and gazing at the cut marks, it was clear that this platform had been carved numerous years ago. Perhaps it was also the doing of that saint. There were 30 or so people on this peak, though only 4 of them were women. The remaining people were all men. However, regardless of gender, they were all extremely handsome and beautiful youths. Even though some of them had horns, tails, or wings, this didn't prevent them from possessing charm and charisma that was capable of bewitching countless people. This was the demeanor of King Tiers. The King Tiers were currently discussing Tao, analyzing the transformations of fire element regulations. However, upon sensing the new arrivals, they all turned around to look. Seeing Ling Han and the others, they couldn't help but feel astonished. 6 King Tiers had actually arrived at once. Moreover, by the looks of it, they were already very well acquainted with each other. Not only that, but it was also clear that the relationship between them was very good. This was obvious when looking at the distance between them. If they weren't friends, who would feel comfortable allowing someone to stand within 9 meters of them? After all, they were all king tiers. At this moment, the king tiers atop the mountain all developed a sense of hostility toward them. This was because this group of king tiers was far too powerful. If they weren't rank 2 king tiers, it was possible that they could be easily defeated by this group. Friends, I'm Shangguan Heng, the host of this king tier gathering. Dare I ask for your names? A young man with wings on his back walked over, a warm smile on his face. It was as if he had no feeling of superiority. Who? At this moment, Zhongqing's figure finally appeared in the distance. He was like an exhausted dog, his mouth wide agape and puffs of white vapor blowing from it. His face was drenched in sweat, and his body was equally as soaked. Chapter 1434, S Small Galaxy. Chapter 1434, S Small Galaxy. Had the heavens collapsed? Why was Zhongqing showing such urgency? Everyone here was a king tier, so their vision was naturally incredibly powerful. Right now, Zhongqing was truly climbing the mountain as if his life depended on it. It appeared as if he was only sweating, but in reality, he was actually forcefully raising his speed and gritting his teeth as he resisted the might of the mountain. The damage that was done to him was invisible and intangible, yet it would be serious enough to severely wound his vitality for several years or even decades to come. His cultivation would barely be able to advance an iota. In fact, it was even possible that his cultivation might fall. Liu Juntian naturally recognized that this was his follower. He couldn't help but feel astonished. What serious matter had occurred? It was actually serious enough to force his follower to such a state. He rushed over to meet Zhongqing, worry growing in his mind. Linghan didn't so much as glance at them. He simply introduced himself to the king tiers. The Rain Emperor, Shu Ran, and the Notionless Saint all followed suit. Of course, the Notionless Saint didn't refer to himself as a saint anymore. Otherwise, he would definitely be pummeled by everyone present. Impersonating a saint was far too arrogant an action. Meanwhile, Empress Luan Xing and the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden didn't speak to introduce themselves. Instead, they each retrieved a chair from their spatial spirit tools before sitting down gracefully. Their movements were elegant and intoxicating, and they instantly attracted the gazes of numerous king tiers. Brother Ling, are you all from the same galaxy? Someone asked. If everyone were from the same nation, they would ask which region they had come from. After all, people from the same region would definitely feel closer to each other. Expanding this notion to galaxies, those from the same nation or same planet would naturally feel closer to each other. Further expanding this notion to the Universian even larger realm, those from the same galaxy would naturally be fellow friends. To king tiers, this was more so a source of reputation and glory. This was because this could represent the cultivation level of their galaxy. Who didn't want to bring glory to their galaxy? This was much like representing a sect in battle. They would naturally feel hostile toward other sects. This was their sense of pride and glory playing up. Ling Han exchanged a glance with the others before replying, Eastern Light Galaxy. Indeed, Joint Peace Planet belonged to the Eastern Light Galaxy. Since the lower realm had ascended to the Joint Peace Planet, they naturally belonged to Joint Peace Planet, and thus the Eastern Light Galaxy. Eastern Light Galaxy? Blank expressions appeared on the king tiers' faces. They had never heard of the Eastern Light Galaxy before. Which large galaxy was this? It had actually produced 6 king tiers at once. Eastern Light, Eastern Light. Ah, I know, a king tier suddenly said with a clap of his hands. There was a look of realization on his face. Which large galaxy is it? The others asked. The king tier who had exclaimed in realization wore a strange expression as he shook his head. What, is it a superlarge galaxy? In the immortal realm, those galaxies that had eternal river tier elites were referred to as large galaxies. However, this required the galaxy to have at least 10 eternal river tier elites. Moreover, one of these elites had to be at the consummate level of the eternal river tier. Meanwhile, if a galaxy had a saint, it could be referred to as a superlarge galaxy. Of course, this didn't require the saint to be a great saint or saint king. It was fine as long as they were a saint. There was no numerical requirement, either. After all, producing a saint was far too difficult. Neither of them, the King Tyr replied with a shake of his head. The Eastern Light Galaxy is a small galaxy. Small galaxy? The galaxies that couldn't meet the requirement of a large galaxy were all referred to as small galaxies. The King Tyrs all wore strange expressions. This small galaxy had actually produced 6 King Tyrs. This was incredible. One had to realize that even large galaxies could only produce a maximum of 2 to 3 King Tyrs. If they produced 4 to 5, they would definitely be entering a golden age of cultivation. However, a small galaxy, if they prayed day and night, perhaps they would be able to produce 1 King Tyr. However, the majority of the time, they would fail to produce even a single King Tyr. Moreover, the King Tyr paused momentarily as if he were testing the ability of the other King Tyrs to accept his words. This small galaxy only has a single Eternal River Tyr elite. Not only that, but this elite is only at the low extreme. Pu. Many of the King Tyrs spluttered in astonishment. This wasn't because they were uncultured, but because this piece of information was far too difficult to accept. This galaxy barely even had an Eternal River Tyr elite. In reality, there had indeed been no Eternal River Tyr elite in the Eastern Light Galaxy for the past 100 or so years. As such, it could be regarded as a bottom-ranking galaxy even among small galaxies. Yet, it had suddenly produced 6 King Tyrs. How could the King Tyrs from the large galaxies accept this? To compare themselves against others was sure to drive them crazy. Is this true? It's impossible, right? Brother have you remembered things incorrectly? The King Tyrs all expressed their doubt over this astonishing revelation. It was simply unfathomable. The King Tyr simply smiled, and said, "Why don't we ask Brother Ling and the others? They can easily confirm this for us." Ling Han didn't refute the King Tyr's information, confirming that the Eastern Light Galaxy indeed only had 1 Eternal River Tyr elite. Moreover, this Eternal River Tyr elite had already passed away. The King Tyrs all yelped in astonishment. This was a rare occasion where they were losing their composure and cool. Fuck, humph. However, there was suddenly a menacing humph at this moment, and they all say Liu Juntian striding over, a harrowing killing intent on his face. His eyes were fixed on Ling Han, and he roared, "Ling Han!" Although Zhongqing didn't know Ling Han's name, Ling Han had already introduced himself just then. As a King Tyr, concentrating on several different things was naturally an easy task for Liu Juntian. Ling Han picked at his ears, and asked, "What's wrong?" "I'm not deaf, you know." "You killed my younger brother," Liu Juntian said gravely. His expression was incredibly dark. His father had passed away early, and he only had this one younger brother. It was evident that he would never get a second younger brother. Thus, regardless of how wanton and profligate Liu Shiyuan was, Liu Juntian still cherished him immensely. As the saying went, an older brother was sometimes like a father. However, his only brother had been killed by Ling Han. Millimeter-HM, Ling Han replied indifferently, appearing completely uncaring. He truly didn't care. You. Liu Juntian was beside himself with rage. This person had killed his younger brother, yet he didn't feel an ounce of guilt or sorrow. "Shouldn't I have killed him?" Ling Han asked with a smile. "I'm sure you're the most familiar with your younger brother's personality. His only use in life is to bring harm and misery unto others. Apart from killing him, what else could I have done?" Very well. Very well. Very well. Liu Juntian repeated this 3 times, a ball of flames materializing above his head with each repetition. These flames then transformed into a fire dragon that arched its back and roared. Roar. A burst of divine sense fluctuated outward, causing the hearts of the King Tyrs to shudder. So powerful. This burst of divine sense possessed a powerful might that caused them to feel unwilling to become enemies with Liu Juntian. Rank 2 King Tyrs were indeed powerful. Then there's nothing more to say. "Pay with your life," Liu Juntian said coldly. He stared at Ling Han, ready to attack at any moment. Ling Han simply replied with a smile. He had no time to debate the debauchery of Liu Shiyuan. He had only been carrying out justice, ridding the world of a sinister person. If Liu Juntian had understood his intentions, he wouldn't have allowed Liu Shiyuan to become so wanton in the first place. So, what more was there to say? They could only resolve this conflict through battle. They're about to do battle. Who do you think is going to win? Liu Juntian, of course. He's a rank 2 king tier, and it's difficult for a galaxy to produce even one such king tier. I admit that the Eastern Light Galaxy or whatnot is extremely incredible, being able to produce 6 king tiers at once. However, I'll eat this piece of stone if someone tells me that this small galaxy even managed to produce a rank 2 king tier. Haha, I think the same. The king tiers all shook their heads, none of them confident in Ling Han's ability to win. What a joke. He had come from a small galaxy that didn't even have an Eternal River tier elite, so how could such a galaxy produce a rank 2 king tier? Empress Luan Xing suddenly stood up, asking, if my husband wins, are you people willing to eat a stone? Were her grace and elegance qualities that could be hidden by a mere piece of fabric? Of the people who had witnessed her true appearance, which of them didn't treat her as the goddess of their dreams? Now that she was standing, her dress fluttered lightly in the mountain wind, making her appear like a divine celestial maiden who was about to drift away with the wind. What did it matter that the others were king tiers? All of them involuntarily held their breaths, dazzled by her beauty. She hadn't shown her face, yet she was still able to intoxicate the entire crowd of king tiers. This was the charm of the Empress. Chapter 1435, Battle of the King Tiers. Chapter 1435, Battle of the King Tiers. The King Tiers were dazzled by her beauty. However, this feeling of elated surprise quickly turned into intense jealousy. This breathtakingly beautiful woman already has a partner. Detestable. Absolutely detestable. Celestial Maiden, if Ling Han truly wins, will be sure to eat some stones, someone said loudly. He refused to believe that Ling Han was also a rank 2 king tier. Meanwhile, Liu Juntian's younger brother had been killed by Ling Han, so Liu Juntian would definitely go all out and unleash his deadliest attacks. As such, Ling Han was already as good as dead. That being the case, this masked yet still seductively beautiful woman would immediately become a widow. Although marrying a widow was a little beneath their status as king tiers, what did that matter? For this woman, it was worth it. Yeah, we'll eat a stone if he wins, numerous others said while patting their chests, all of them harboring the same thoughts. None of them wanted to appear weak before Empress Luan Xing. Empress Luan Xing nodded as she remembered all of these people. When the time came, none of them would be able to escape punishment. Not far from them, Liu Juntian was already burning with rage. Who? The 3 fire dragons about his head danced and slithered about before one of them suddenly dashed out and swooped at Ling Han. Liu Juntian was extremely cautious, and this first attack was only a probing one. Ling Han snapped his fingers in reply. Xiu. A burst of sword chi slashed outward, instantly shredding the fire dragon into pieces. These shredded pieces then transformed into countless sparks that flitted in the air before vanishing. The fire dragon had failed to cause any damage. However, Liu Juntian wasn't worried in the least. If Ling Han couldn't even withstand this strike, he would be a stain on the title of king tier. What did astonish him, however, was how easily Ling Han dealt with his attack. He was completely unable to determine Ling Han's strength. He raised his right hand and lightly made a pushing motion with his palm. Origin power gathered before forming into another fire dragon. However, compared to the one from before, this fire dragon was at least a dozen times larger. The might that radiated from it was also numerous times more powerful. Ling Han shook his head, again snapping his fingers in reply. Sword chi burst forth, instantly reducing the fire dragon to sparks again. During his 70 or so years on Cloud Apex planet, his advance in cultivation hadn't been significant. However, his improvement in the sword Dao had been simply astonishing. With the help of the reincarnation tree and reincarnation tea, he was able to make huge progress on this path. In terms of sword Dao alone, he could genuinely be regarded as a grandmaster of the current generation. Still trying to probe me? Ling Han asked with a smile. I came here to see King Tears, not to watch monkeys showing off their tricks. What arrogance, Liu Juntian said with a humph. However, he finally ended his probing attacks, leaping forward and charging at Ling Han. At the same time, he unclasped his right hand, where a long spear rapidly materialized into existence. This wasn't a god tool that he had retrieved from his spatial spirit tool, but rather a weapon that he had formed using his origin power. Frighteningly, this spear was imbued with several divine patterns, making it appear like a supreme elite who was descending from another realm. It exuded a feeling of might and invincibility. Liu Juntian brandished his spear and swept it toward Ling Han. This was a secret technique that he had learned from an ancient site. This spear was profoundly mighty, and it was one of his most powerful attacks. Ling Han didn't dare to be careless. He was also a rank 2 king tier, and their cultivation levels were more so the same. Thus, their power would also be equivalent. Of course, this would be different if he were a special case like Ding Ping, whose power could exceed his cultivation level by 2 stars. In any case, he couldn't underestimate a king tier like Liu Juntian. Ling Han finally moved, making a tapping motion with his finger. The lightning sword technique was instantly activated, sending bursts of sword chi into the surroundings, all of them incredibly quick. How arrogant! Liu Juntian shouted in rage. He had only been probing Ling Han before, so it was understandable that Ling Han had responded by snapping his fingers. However, he was already launching one of his most powerful attacks now, yet Ling Han was still responding by merely making a tapping motion. You dissed me for probing you and being unwilling to unleash my trump cards, yet isn't that exactly what you're doing? However, as the sword chi spread outward, he immediately felt the immense pressure that was radiating from it. The sword chi unleashed by his opponent genuinely appeared no weaker than his origin power spear. Ordinarily, his spear would be invincible whenever it was unleashed. Even if his opponent were more powerful than him, he would still be able to forcefully rip a hole in their defenses and aggressively attack, killing them in a single strike. Thus, although his power could only surpass 6 stars, his battle prowess could definitely surpass more than this, reaching 7 or even 8 stars. This was the strength of rank 2 king tiers. Boom, boom, boom. Ling Han's sword chi continued to exchange blows with Liu Juntian's spear. Both of their attacks were formed from origin power, yet under the manipulation of the 2 powerful king tiers, they appeared incredibly real and tangible. Each time they collided, there would be dazzling flashes of divine patterns, followed by currents of air that seemed powerful enough to suppress all beings between heaven and earth. In fact, these currents of air would even transform into figures of demons. This intense battle caused the other king tiers to all click their tongues in wonder. At the same time, their expressions also became especially serious. Right now, each of them was a competitor fighting for a spot to enter the Star Sand Martial Arts Academy. Following this, they would ascend the path of becoming a saint. Everyone understood that this was a narrow path that only one person could follow to the end. Only one person would be able to emerge from this competition as king. Now, however, both Ling Han and Liu Juntian were displaying a domineering might that was enough to make them tremble in apprehension. How could they beat such supreme king tiers? Prodigies were divided into levels, and the same went for king tiers. How could rank 1 king tiers defeat rank 2 king tiers? Meanwhile, the faces of some king tiers twitched unnaturally. These were the king tiers who had made a gamble with Empress Luan Xing. If Ling Han emerged victorious, they would have to eat the stones on this mountain peak. Although eating a stone wouldn't kill them being king tiers and all, this was still something that they definitely didn't want to do. Firstly, stones would definitely taste disgusting. Secondly, eating stones would definitely feel horrible. Lastly, eating stones would be utterly humiliating, especially for king tiers such as themselves. Liu Juntian, you've definitely got to win. Liu Juntian naturally wanted to win as well. Not only did he want to win, but he even wanted to kill Ling Han. Following a furious roar, raging flames instantly exploded from his body. These flames then transformed into black divine flames. Along with the dazzling spear in his hands, Liu Juntian appeared much like an ancient demon god. Ding, ding, ding. Sword chi swept toward Liu Juntian. However, The divine flames enveloping him transformed into a suit of armor that surprisingly blocked all of the sword chi. Liu Juntian aggressively advanced, and it was as if nothing would be able to stop him. Interesting. Ling Han squinted his eyes. This suit of flaming armor wasn't incredible in its defensive capabilities, but rather devastating in its offensive prowess. It had disintegrated all of the attacks before it, and thus naturally rendered them unthreatening. Fire element cultivation techniques weren't great in terms of defense. However, the person who had created this cultivation technique had raised the offensive power of flames to a pinnacle level, using offense to replace defense. This gave Ling Han an urge to clap his hands and exclaim in wonderment. Not only this, but the suit of fire armor was also extremely capable of wounding the attacker. After all, would one dare to punch it with their bare fists? Ling Han chuckled as he balled his right hand into a fist and directly launched a punch at Liu Juntian. This. Liu Juntian was astonished. The secret technique he was using was called the Scorching Flame Armor, and it was also a technique that he had obtained from an ancient mystery realm. Its powerful might was evident, and it was a suit of armor that could burn even elites at the consummate level of the heavenly body tier. If one were at the high extreme, it was possible that they could even be directly incinerated into ashes. You actually dare to touch this armor? After a moment as astonishment, Liu Juntian instantly sneered in his mind. His opponent was seeking death. Both of them were king tiers, and it was very likely that Ling Han was also a rank 2 king tier. As such, their battle would have needed to drag on for a long time before a victor could finally be determined. However, who told Ling Han to be rash? He was actually facing his most powerful attack head-on. If this wasn't seeking death, then what was? Since you want death, I'll grant it to you. Liu Juntian didn't dodge, and thus Ling Han's fist howled over just like that, directly blasting at his face. At this moment, Liu Juntian felt extremely peeved even though he could envision Ling Han's fist being ruthlessly incinerated into ashes. Fucking hell, this person is far too despicable. He's aiming right for my face. Doesn't he know the saying to never aim for one's face? Ling Han's fist arrived. Chapter 1436, Resounding Defy. Chapter 1436, Resounding Defy. The people present were all king tiers of the current generation, and thus they were naturally very skilled when it came to analyzing the battles of others. When Ling Han's fist struck Liu Juntian's face, all of them squinted, and it was as if time had suddenly slowed down, with everything playing out in slow motion. Of course, this wasn't because time had actually slowed down, but rather because their minds were whirring far too quickly, making it seem as if the entire world around them had slowed down. When Ling Han's fist collided with the suit of flaming armor, a ball of boundless flames immediately surged toward him, yearning to disintegrate his fist. However, how powerful was Ling Han's physique? Moreover, he had even bathed in immortal flames before. As such, these flames were but a tickle on his hand. Pang! Without receiving an iota of damage, Ling Han's fist heavily slammed into Liu Juntian's face. Like rolling waves, countless ripples started to undulate across his face. He was then lifted off his feet and sent flying backward. The scene instantly sped up as the flow of time returned to normal. Pa! Liu Juntian thumped into the ground. Astonishment swept over the mountain peak. It was still too early to conclude who would win, yet one thing had already become apparent. Liu Juntian had suffered a huge loss in this exchange. Ling Han retracted his fist. Among those at the same cultivation level, his freakish physique meant that he could ignore any attacks from his opponents. The indestructible Heaven Scroll was from the celestial realm, and it was more so one of the most advanced cultivation techniques. As such, wouldn't it be embarrassing if he couldn't even suppress a cultivation technique from the immortal realm? Liu Juntian picked himself up, shock all over his face. He was unable to accept this. His flaming armor had failed to even wound Ling Han's skin. All it had achieved was creating a bit of smoke on Ling Han's fist. This was analogous to a mortal quickly sweeping their hand through a flame completely harmless. How is this possible? My divine flames can burn even elites at the consummate level of the heavenly body tier. Liu Juntian took a deep breath. Although he had already unleashed one of his most powerful attacks, it was clear that he had still underestimated Ling Han. His opponent was definitely a rank 2 king tier. No wonder you're acting so arrogant. So, it turns out that you're also a rank 2 king tier, he spat in a baleful voice. His words sent a wave of commotion through the king tiers. Rank 2 king tier. A small galaxy that didn't even have an eternal river tier elite had actually produced a rank 2 king tier. How could they accept this? However, if Ling Han wasn't a rank 2 king tier, how could he have sent Liu Juntian flying? Haha, I'm just SOSO, Ling Han replied indifferently. His wife was even more impressive than him. She was a rank 3 king tier. Liu Juntian's expression became even darker. Weren't rank 2 king tiers impressive enough? After all, most saints were only rank 2 king tiers as well. In other words, if they were at the same cultivation level, they could battle toe-to-toe with most saint. However, from Ling Han's reply, rank 2 king tiers were only SOSO. What else did he want? Fine, then let us see which of us is the king among kings. Fighting spirit soared from Liu Juntian as numerous black divine patterns materialized on his body. They were densely packed, and in the end, they transformed into lengths of chains that were wrapped around his body. It was as if he had transformed into a great demon god. Boom! As if they were experiencing the birth of the universe, the sound of rumbling thunder traveled out from Liu Juntian's body. These were the sounds of Tao. The sound of Tao had actually been released from the body of a heavenly body tier elite. Just how incredible was this? Even though the spectators were all king tiers, they still couldn't help but feel stunned by this sight. No wonder Liu Juntian had received praise from a saint. Indeed, he had already far surpassed the level of ordinary king tiers. In fact, his overwhelming prowess even exerted an intangible pressure on the surrounding king tiers, making these absolute prodigies want to gaze up to him in awe. This powerful pressure also provoked Ling Han, causing him to drop his arrogant demeanor and become serious. An intense fighting spirit burst from his eyes, his pupil reflecting the images of exploding heavenly bodies. It was as if his pupils were reflecting a scene of destruction and creation. It was a pity that no one took notice of this. Otherwise, they would definitely become even more shocked. Destruction and creation. This was the highest level of Tao. I'll obliterate you with a single punch, Liu Juntian roared. He charged forward, a profoundly domineering aura emanating from his body. Supreme king tiers like them could battle without pause for several years or even several hundred years. However, it was also possible that they could determine a victor after just 2 or 3 exchanges. This all came down to whether or not they were willing to unleash their most powerful trump cards. If they were, then the battles would naturally be over in a flash. Chains of regulations that had been formed from divine patterns were wrapped all over Liu Juntian's body, making him appear like a demon king. At the same time, however, there were also sounds of Tao emanating from his body like a chant. These juxtaposing powers made for an extremely peculiar scene. However, no one doubted his supreme power at this moment. Boom! The chains around his body shot out, the sounds of Tao also transforming into a golden figure that possessed 3 heads and 6 arms. All of these attacks surged toward Ling Han. This was Liu Juntian's most powerful ultimate technique. Ling Han didn't hold back, either. He was going to battle with his full strength. In the blink of an eye, Liu Juntian's attack had already arrived. Wang! Ling Han unleashed heaven's might before dashing forward, his hands pushing upward as he also activated Tide of the Ages. Without exception, the chains of regulations and golden figure both started to disintegrate at a speed that was visible to the naked eye. Peng, peng. Ling Han crashed into these attacks. However, how could these deteriorated attacks that were teetering on the edge of implosion wound or stop him? He crashed straight through them, instantly arriving before Liu Juntian. The spectating king tiers were all transfixed with shock. Such a formidable attack had actually failed to affect Ling Han. As Ling Han's opponent, Liu Juntian had more so already gone numb with shock. He hurriedly raised his arms, crossing them before his chest. Origin power surged before him, forming his last line of defense. However, it was a shame that he was in his weakest state after unleashing his ultimate technique. Moreover, Ling Han had already unleashed Heaven's Might, forcefully suppressing his power by 2 stars. As such, his defense at this moment was laughably brittle and weak. Ling Han launched another punch, again at Liu Juantian's face. Peng! As if it were made from water, Liu Juantian's origin power shield instantly shattered into pieces. Ling Han's fist smashed into his face, sending him flying. However, a dim glow suddenly appeared, and a sigh unexpectedly traveled out from Liu Juantian's body. This sigh carried with it a paramount might, causing all of the king tiers atop the mountain peak to go weak at the knees. This was a suppression on the level of life. It was as like an eternal river tier elite facing a heavenly body tier elite, or a Genesis tier saint facing an eternal river tier elite. Liu Juntian crashed into the ground with a loud thump. Surprisingly, however, only his face was red and swollen. He hadn't been killed. This was inconceivable, not in the least because Ling Han's punch had genuinely been tremendously powerful. In fact, Ling Han had unleashed his full power when throwing that punch. Not to mention that Liu Juntian was only at the medium extreme, his body should have been obliterated even if he were at the peak stage of the pinnacle level. After all, not everyone possessed a physique as freakish as Ling Han's. Once their origin power shield was shattered, their unprotected body would be incredibly weak against attacks. The king tiers were all astounded. This time, their surprise wasn't born from Ling Han's unfathomable strength. Instead, it was caused by that sigh from Liu Juantian's body. That sigh had caused even their souls to tremble in apprehension. This is the might of a Genesis tier saint. I'm certain, someone exclaimed. It wasn't difficult to reach such a conclusion. Many of the king tiers were from superlarge galaxies, and some were even the disciples or grand disciples of saints. Thus, it was only natural that they could recognize the aura of a saint. I understand. This was something prepared by the Dpankara saint. Indeed, the Dpankara saint had held high hopes for Liu Juntian, so it's not surprising that he left a wisp of his aura inside his body. As expected of a saint. He saved Liu Juantian's life. However, it can only save him once. The king tiers chattered among themselves, discussing what they had just witnessed. Meanwhile, Ling Han could obviously charge over to deal the killing punch. Or he could summon his divine demon's sword to end Liu Juantian's life. However, since the Dpankara saint had already appeared, him killing Liu Juntian would be equivalent to him opposing the Dpankara saint. Right now, he still didn't possess the right to oppose a saint. So be it, I'll spare Liu Juantian's life. I'll pretend that I'm giving face to a saint. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories,